They called him the King of Corpses. Emperor Draven Kael'thorn had built his throne on the bones of conquered kingdoms, had carved his name into history with a blade still wet with blood, but none of that mattered now. Because the one thing every conqueror needs, the one thing that separates a legacy from a footnote, he didn't have. An heir. The Empire whispered behind gilded fans and marble columns. They said the gods had cursed him. They said his bloodline would die with him, and Varathorn would burn. But then she walked into his throne room, this healer woman with fire in her eyes and rebellion on her tongue, and she refused to kneel. And that changed everything. Stick around till the end of this story, hit that like button, and drop your city in the comments so I know where my tribe is watching from. The throne room of Nightfall Citadel stank of fear. Draven could smell it the moment the guards dragged the prisoners through the bronze doors, that acrid tang of sweat and terror that clung to people who knew they were about to die. He'd smelled it 1,000 times before, on battlefields, in conquered cities, in the bedchambers of nobles who'd plotted against him. It never got old. He sat sprawled across the obsidian throne, one leg hooked over the armrest, watching the procession with the detached interest of a man observing insects. The crown of blackened iron sat heavy on his head, but he'd worn it so long he barely noticed the weight anymore. What he did notice was the heat. The throne room was always too damn hot, with its massive braziers burning dragon oil and the afternoon sun hammering through the stained glass windows that depicted his greatest victories. Sweat trickled down his spine beneath the heavy ceremonial armor. He hated these audiences, hated the pageantry, hated the way the nobles clustered in their silk and jewels, parasites feeding on the empire he'd bled to build. But this was the price of power. You had to remind them, constantly, that you were the one holding the knife. Lord Chancellor Vex stepped forward, his reedy voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. The old bastard loved the sound of his own voice almost as much as he loved counting gold. Your Majesty, these prisoners stand accused of high treason. They gave aid and comfort to the rebel forces in the Ashmark region. They sheltered insurgents, provided medical supplies, treated wounded enemies of the state. Draven yawned. He didn't bother covering his mouth. The prisoners were a sorry lot. 3 men, 2 women. Dirty, bruised, chains rattling as they stumbled forward. 4 of them had their eyes on the floor, shoulders hunched in that universal posture of the defeated. But the fifth one was staring right at him. Draven's attention sharpened. He let his legs slide off the armrest, sitting up straighter. The woman was younger than he'd expected. Mid-20s, maybe. Dark hair matted with grime. A split lip, freshly scabbed over. Her dress, once probably white or cream, was torn and stained with what looked like old blood. But her eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they held absolutely no fear. Vex was still talking, droning on about evidence and witnesses. Draven raised one hand, and the Chancellor's voice died like someone had cut his throat. The silence that followed was absolute. 300 courtiers held their breath. "You," Draven said, pointing at the woman. "What's your name?" It wasn't a question. She tilted her head slightly, and he saw the muscles in her jaw work. For a moment he thought she might actually spit at him. The guards flanking her tensed, hands moving to their sword hilts. "Seraphine Vale," she said finally. Her voice was rougher than he'd expected. Raw, like she'd been screaming, or maybe just hadn't had water in a while. "Seraphine Vale," he repeated, tasting the syllables. "You're accused of healing rebels, enemies of the Empire, my enemies." She didn't blink. "I'm a healer. I heal people. That's what I do." A ripple of shock ran through the assembled nobles. "You didn't talk to the Emperor like that. You didn't use that tone, that casual, almost bored inflection, like she was explaining something obvious to a particularly stupid child." Draven felt something unfamiliar flicker in his chest. Not anger. He was used to anger. This was something else, something almost like amusement. "Is that so?" he said softly. "You heal people. Any people. Even rebels who want to burn this empire to ashes. Even traitors who'd put a knife in my back if they got close enough. Even them," she said, "because that's what healers do. We don't ask if someone deserves to live. We just try to keep them alive." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying her. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in the dark circles under her eyes, the way she swayed slightly, like she might collapse, if not for sheer stubbornness. There was a burn scar on her left forearm, old and silvered. "And you think that makes you noble," he said. "You think that makes you righteous." "I think it makes me a healer," she shot back. "What you think doesn't really matter to me." The throne room erupted, nobles gasping, guards stepping forward. Vex's face went purple with outrage. "Your Majesty, this insolence, she must be silenced immediately." Draven raised his hand again. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. He stood up. The movement was deliberately slow, uncoiling from the throne like a predator rising from rest. He was tall, taller than most men, and the armor added bulk to shoulders already broadened by years of swinging a sword. He descended the 7 steps from the throne platform, his boots ringing on black marble. The other prisoners cringed away as he approached. Seraphine held her ground. He stopped an arm's length from her. This close he could see the flecks of green in those storm-gray eyes, could see the pulse hammering in her throat. So she was afraid. She was just refusing to show it. "Do you know how many people I've killed?" he asked conversationally. She swallowed. Her chains clinked as her hands clenched into fists. "No, neither do I," he said. "I stopped counting years ago. Hundreds, thousands, maybe. I've burned cities. I've executed entire noble houses down to the last infant. I've done things that would make your rebel friends look like saints." He paused, letting that sink in. "And you stand here, in chains, facing execution, and you tell me what I think doesn't matter." Her chin came up. "That's right." "Why?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. Her brow furrowed slightly. "Why what? Why don't you beg? Every single person who stood where you're standing, they all begged eventually. They cried. They groveled. They offered me gold, information, their own mothers. But not you. So why?" Something shifted in her expression. Not fear. Something harder, colder. "Because you're going to kill me anyway," she said. "Begging won't change that, so why give you the satisfaction?" Draven stared at her. Then, to the shock of everyone present, he laughed. It was a sound rarely heard in Nightfall Citadel, rough and rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. He turned to face the assembled court. The nobles looked at him like he'd gone mad. Maybe he had. "Clear the room," he said. Vex spluttered. "Your Majesty, the proceedings, clear the room." The Chancellor's mouth snapped shut. He bowed hastily and began herding the courtiers toward the exits. It took 10 minutes for the throne room to empty, 10 minutes of shuffling feet and confused whispers. The guards remained, 24 armed men ringing the chamber. "All of you," Draven said without looking at them. "Out." "Sire," the captain of the guard said hesitantly, "your safety? If I can't handle one woman in chains, what kind of emperor am I?" "Out." They went. Reluctantly, casting worried glances over their shoulders. The bronze doors boomed shut, leaving Draven alone with the 5 prisoners. He walked past Seraphine, around behind her. She tracked him with her eyes as far as she could, then had to turn her head. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her weight shifted to the balls of her feet, ready to move even though there was nowhere to go. "The other 4 prisoners," he said, addressing them directly for the first time. "You're free to go." They stared at him like he'd spoken in tongues. One of the men, older with a gray beard, found his voice first. "Your Majesty, we don't I don't care if you understand. The charges are dropped. Get out of my city. If I see your faces again, I'll have you flayed. Go." Guards appeared as if summoned, moving forward to unlock the chains. The prisoners stumbled toward the exit, too terrified to even thank him. The old man cast one last look at Seraphine, anguish in his face. She gave him the tiniest shake of her head. "Go." The doors boomed shut again. Now it was just the 2 of them in that vast chamber of shadows and smoke. Draven moved back around to face her. This close, he could see the rapid rise and fall of her chest, the way her fingers trembled slightly before she clenched them still. "You should have run," he said quietly. "I don't run." "No," he agreed. "You don't. Even when you should. That's going to get you killed one day. Today, apparently." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe not. Depends on you." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" It was his turn to pause, to consider. What did he want? He'd been asking himself that question a lot lately, usually in the deep hours of the night when sleep wouldn't come and the weight of the empire pressed down on his chest like a stone. I want you to tell me the truth, he said finally. Do you actually believe in what you're doing? This healing everyone nonsense? Or is it just a cover? A way to move through the countryside, gathering intelligence for the rebels? It's not nonsense, she said, and there was heat in her voice now. Real anger breaking through the exhaustion. People are dying. Whole villages burned to the ground because they couldn't pay your taxes. Children starving because your armies take everything. Someone has to help them. My armies, he repeated. My taxes. You blame me for all of it. You're the emperor. Who else should I blame? Fair point, he admitted. He began to pace, a restless energy building in his limbs. The armor felt suddenly suffocating. Do you know why I built this empire? She watched him move, wary. To conquer, to rule. Because you could. Wrong, he said flatly. I built it because the alternative was worse. Before I unified the kingdoms, this entire continent was drowning in blood. Every petty lordling with a castle thought he was a king. They raided each other's lands, burned, raped, enslaved. There was no law, no order, just endless, pointless war. And you fixed that, she said. Her voice dripped sarcasm. By burning even more, by killing even more. Yes, he said simply. I gave them something to fear more than each other. Me. I showed them that rebellion meant death, that disloyalty meant extinction. And you know what happened? Enlighten me. The wars stopped. Trade routes reopened. People could travel without being murdered by bandits every 10 miles. Cities grew. Populations recovered. I created peace. Peace, she echoed. Is that what you call this? The people I treat, the ones your soldiers beat and burn, is that your peace? He stopped pacing, turned to face her fully. Nothing worth having comes without cost. You think I wanted to be this? You think I enjoyed becoming a monster? You chose it, she said. Every day you choose it. And the venom in her voice, the absolute certainty, hit him harder than any blade could have. Because she wasn't wrong. He had chosen this. Every execution, every burned village, every harsh law and cruel tax. He'd chosen all of it, telling himself it was necessary, that the end justified the means, that one day, when the empire was finally strong enough, finally secure enough, he could afford to be merciful. But that day never came. There was always another threat, another rebellion, another reason to tighten his grip. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Draven moved to the side of the room where a table held wine and water. He poured 2 cups of water, brought one to Seraphine. She stared at it like it might be poisoned. It's just water, he said. You look like you haven't had any in days. She took it with her manacled hands, drank carefully. He watched her throat work, saw the visible relief that flooded through her. When she lowered the cup, it was empty. Why did you let them go? She asked. The others. Because I don't actually want to execute a bunch of terrified peasants, he said. It's boring and pointless. Killing you, though, that might send a message. She met his eyes. So do it. Not yet, he said. I'm still deciding. Deciding what? If you're worth more to me alive or dead. Her laugh was bitter, unexpected. Well, that's honest, at least. Most tyrants pretend to care about justice. I'm not most tyrants, he said. And I stopped pretending about a lot of things a long time ago. He drained his own cup, set it down. The thing about empires, Seraphine, is they need more than armies to survive. They need legitimacy, continuation. They need heirs. Her expression shifted, confusion flickering across her face. What does that have to do with me? Everything, he said, or nothing. I haven't decided yet. Before she could respond, the bronze doors opened again. Vex appeared, looking nervous. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but the evening gathering is about to begin. The noble houses are assembling. Draven bit back a curse. He'd forgotten about the damn gathering. Another tedious affair. Another evening of watching the nobility peacock around while they plotted against him behind fake smiles. Take her to the North Tower, he told Vex. Guest quarters, not the dungeon. Postguards. If anyone touches her, I'll remove their hands personally. Vex's eyes widened, but he bowed. As you command, sire. Guest quarters, Seraphine said flatly. Am I a prisoner or a guest? Yes, Draven said. He turned and walked back toward his throne, dismissing her from his thoughts. Or trying to. But as the guards led her away, he found his eyes following her, found himself wondering what it would take to make a woman like that kneel, what it would take to break that defiance, and more dangerously, wondering if he even wanted to. The gathering was exactly as miserable as Draven had anticipated. The great hall blazed with light from 1,000 candles. Long tables groaned under platters of roasted meat, exotic fruits, delicacies shipped from every corner of the empire. Musicians played in the gallery, some insipid court ballad about love and honor. The nobles dressed in their finest, jewels glittering, wine flowing, all of them watching him, always watching. Draven sat at the high table, suffering through course after course of food he barely tasted. To his right sat Lord Marius of House Ironhold, droning on about trade disputes. To his left, Lady Celestine of House Starweaver, her laugh too loud and too calculated as she laughed at things that weren't funny. They were all performing, for him, for each other, playing their little games of status and influence. He hated every second of it. Your Majesty seems distracted tonight, Celestine purred, leaning closer than propriety suggested. Her perfume was cloying, sweet enough to choke on. Is something troubling you? Just the usual, he said, reaching for his wine. The glass was gold, encrusted with rubies, heavy enough to brain someone with. Treason. Rebellion. The endless tedium of ruling. Her hand found his arm, fingers trailing across the silk of his sleeve. Perhaps you need a distraction, she said, her voice dropping to something she probably thought was seductive. Something to take your mind off such heavy burdens. He looked at her hand, then at her face. She was beautiful, objectively. Blonde hair arranged in elaborate curls, sapphire eyes, a figure that the dress emphasized to the point of indecency. He felt absolutely nothing. Perhaps, he said neutrally, and extracted his arm to reach for more wine. From across the hall, he saw Prince Malrek watching him. His younger brother reclined at a table surrounded by sycophants, that permanent smirk on his face. Malrek raised his glass in mock salute. Draven didn't return the gesture. His brother was a problem he'd have to deal with eventually. The man was too ambitious, too charismatic, too willing to play the Game of Thrones. But not tonight. Tonight he just wanted this whole thing to be over. The evening dragged on. Toasts were made. Draven forced himself to stand and give a speech about unity and strength. The nobles applauded dutifully. More wine flowed. Someone suggested dancing. Draven excused himself before that fresh hell could begin. He made his way through the corridors of Nightfall Citadel, guards falling into step behind him. He waved them off impatiently. I'm going to bed, alone. I don't need an escort to walk through my own damn castle. They hesitated, but they knew better than to argue. He watched them retreat, then kept walking. But not toward his chambers. He found himself climbing the stairs to the North Tower instead. The guards posted outside Seraphine's door snapped to attention. He waved them away too. Give me privacy. Go. They went. He stood outside the door for a long moment, wondering what the hell he was doing. This was madness. She was a prisoner, a rebel sympathizer, someone he should have executed and forgotten about. But instead he was here. He opened the door without knocking. The room was modest by palace standards. A bed, a table and chairs, a window with iron bars. Seraphine stood by that window, still in her torn and filthy dress, looking out at the lights of the city below. She didn't turn when he entered. Did you come to make your decision? Draven closed the door behind him. Maybe. She finally looked at him. In the candlelight, her face was all shadows and angles. That's a long walk for a maybe. I needed air, he said. The court gatherings are suffocating. Poor Emperor, she said mockingly. So hard being surrounded by people who worship you. They don't worship me, he said. They fear me. There's a difference. Is there? He moved into the room, studying her. Someone had left water and bread on the table. She'd eaten the bread but barely touched the water. Still don't trust me. Would you? She asked. In my position? Fair point, he admitted. He sat in one of the chairs, gestured to the other. Sit. I'd rather stand. I'd rather you sit. Humor me. She studied him for a long moment, then crossed to the table. But she didn't sit. She gripped the back of the chair, knuckles white, still defiant, still refusing to yield even an inch. "Tell me about House Lunareth," he said abruptly. Her reaction was immediate, visceral. Color drained from her face. Her grip on the chair tightened until he thought the wood might splinter. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," he said softly. "I've had people looking into your background since the moment you were arrested. Seraphine Vale, orphan, raised by traveling healers. No family name, no history before age 12. Very convenient." "So what?" she said. "Lots of people are orphans. Your wars made sure of that." The barb landed, but he didn't flinch. House Lunareth was destroyed 30 years ago, wiped out during the Consolidation Wars. Every member of the bloodline hunted down and executed because they refused to bend the knee to my father. She said nothing, but he saw her throat work as she swallowed. "They had a gift," he continued, "a power passed down through generations. Lunar magic, they called it. Healing, protection, the ability to see truth through lies. Very dangerous abilities if you're trying to build an empire on fear." "That's ancient history," she said. "It has nothing to do with me." "Doesn't it?" he asked. He leaned forward. "You have a scar on your shoulder blade. Burn scar, shaped like a crescent moon. I saw it when the guards searched you." Her hand moved unconsciously to her shoulder, then froze. "That mark," Draven said. "It's the sigil of House Lunareth. Every member of the bloodline bore it. A birthmark that manifested with their powers." Seraphine turned away from him, moved back to the window. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "If what you're saying is true, if I really am what you think I am, then you should kill me. Finish what your father started." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe you're exactly what I need." She whirled to face him. "What the hell does that mean?" He stood, moved toward her, slowly, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "There's a prophecy," he said. "Old words from the priests before I had them all executed or driven out. They spoke of a moon queen, a daughter of Lunareth who would rise in the Empire's darkest hour. They said she would either save it or destroy it." "Prophecies are bullshit," she spat. "Probably," he agreed. "But the nobles believe in them. The people believe in them. And right now my empire is fracturing. Rebellions in 3 provinces. My brother circling like a vulture, and no heir to secure the line." He stopped an arm's length from her, exactly where he'd stood in the throne room. "I need a queen," he said. "Someone who can give me an heir. Someone who can bring legitimacy to my rule beyond just fear and conquest." "And you think I'll just agree to that?" she said incredulously. "Marry you, bear your children, become part of everything I despise?" "No," he said honestly. "I think you'll fight me every step of the way, but I also think you're smart enough to see the opportunity." "What opportunity?" "To be a tyrant's whore. To change things," he said. "From the inside. As Empress, you'd have power, resources. You could help those people you care so much about, build hospitals, reform the laws, make a real difference instead of just stitching up rebels in barns." That actually made her pause. He saw the calculation in her eyes, the wheels turning. "Why would you give me that kind of power?" she asked. "You don't strike me as the sharing type." "Because I'm tired," he said. And the admission surprised him as much as it did her. "I'm tired of being the monster, tired of endless war and execution, and wondering if tonight's the night someone finally gets a knife past my guards. I've built this empire. Now I need someone to help me actually run it, someone the people might actually love instead of just fear." "Love," she repeated. "You think people could love me just because I used to heal them?" "I think they'd love you for not being me," he said. "And I think if anyone could actually make this empire into something better, it might be you. If you're willing to try." Seraphine stared at him. He could see her mind working, weighing options, calculating odds. She wasn't stupid. She knew she had almost no leverage here, but she also knew he wouldn't have made this offer if he didn't need her. "What if I refuse?" she asked finally. "Then I'll have you executed at dawn," he said, "and find someone else. It won't be as effective, but I'll manage." "How romantic," she said dryly. "I'm not offering romance," he said. "I'm offering a deal, a partnership. You give me an heir and legitimacy. I give you power and the chance to actually change things." "And what happens when I try to change things you don't like?" she asked. When I start dismantling your precious empire of fear. Then we'll fight about it, he said with a shrug. Wouldn't be the first time someone disagreed with me. Usually ends badly for them, but you seem to enjoy taking risks. Despite everything, he saw the corner of her mouth twitch, almost a smile. You're insane. Probably, he agreed. Is that a yes? She took a deep breath, let it out slowly. If I agree to this, I have conditions. Of course you do. I want full access to the Treasury for medical supplies and relief efforts. I want the authority to pardon nonviolent prisoners. And I want your word that you'll actually listen when I tell you you're being a tyrant. Done, and that last one's impossible, but I'll try, he said. Anything else? Yes, she said. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes, close enough to smell the sweat and grime, and something underneath that was just her. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to tie myself to you, I need to know. Did you have my mentor killed? The question hung between them like a blade. The old healer, he said. In the village of Thornmere, 3 months ago. Yes. He held her gaze, didn't look away. Yes. My soldiers executed him for harboring insurgents. I gave the order. He watched her absorb that, watched the pain flash across her face before she locked it down, expected her to rage at him, to attack him, to call the whole thing off. Instead, she just nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. Does that change your answer? He asked. She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. No. Because if I say no, his death meant nothing. But if I say yes, if I can actually use this power to save others, then maybe it meant something after all. She held out her hand. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her eyes were clear. I'll be your queen, she said, and may the gods help us both. Draven took her hand. Her skin was rough, scarred from years of healing work. Nothing like the soft, pampered hands of the court ladies. He found he preferred it. No gods, he said. Just us. That's all we've ever had anyway. He should have left then. Should have called the guards, had her moved to better quarters, started the process of making this alliance official. Instead, he stood there, her hand still in his, close enough to see the exhaustion in every line of her face, close enough to see the fear she was still trying to hide. I meant what I said, he told her quietly, about being tired, about wanting things to be different. I don't expect you to believe me, but it's true. Then prove it, she said. Show me this empire can be something other than death and ashes. I'll try, he said, and was surprised to realize he meant it. He released her hand, stepped back. Tomorrow we'll make the announcement. Tonight, get some rest. You'll need it. He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the latch. Seraphine. She looked at him. When this goes badly, and it will go badly at some point, remember that you chose this, that I gave you the choice. When it goes badly, she said, remember that I told you it would, and that you did it anyway. Fair enough, he said. He left her there by the window, staring out at the city that would soon be hers as much as his. And as he walked back through the dark corridors of Nightfall Citadel, Draven Kaelthorn, Emperor of Verathorn, conqueror of 6 kingdoms, the man they called the King of Corpses, allowed himself something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. It probably wouldn't last, but for tonight, it was enough. 3 floors below, in a room thick with incense and shadow, Prince Malrek poured wine for his guests. So, he said conversationally, our dear brother is keeping a prisoner in the North Tower. Guest quarters, no less. Anyone know why? The men around the table exchanged glances. They were Malrek's inner circle, nobles who'd grown tired of Draven's iron rule, generals who felt overlooked, merchants who wanted more freedom to exploit, traders, all of them. But useful traders. They say she's a healer, one of them offered, caught helping rebels. And my brother, who executes rebels before breakfast, is keeping this one alive. Malrek swirled his wine, watching the candlelight reflect in the dark liquid. Interesting. Do you think he means to make an example of her? Another asked. Some public execution. No, Malrek said slowly. If that were the case, she'd be in the dungeons. This is something else. He set down his glass, leaned back in his chair. Send word to our people in the palace. I want to know everything about this woman, where she came from, what she said to my brother, why he's suddenly interested in a common healer, and if we find out, then we'll decide how best to use the information, Malrek said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. After all, my brother has always been so focused on external threats. It would be a shame if he forgot to watch his back. The men laughed, toasted to their prince's cleverness, made plans and promises in that smoke-filled room. None of them noticed the servant in the corner, the one refilling wine glasses and clearing plates, the one whose eyes were just a bit too sharp, whose ears were just a bit too keen, the one who would report every word back to Emperor Draven before the night was through. Because even tyrants need spies, especially when their own blood plots against them. The spy's report reached Draven before dawn. He read it standing by the window of his private study, still dressed in yesterday's clothes. He hadn't slept. Sleep was a luxury emperors couldn't afford when their brothers plotted in smoke-filled rooms and whispered treason over wine. The parchment crackled as his grip tightened. Malrek. Always Malrek. His younger brother had been circling for years, gathering malcontents like flies to rotting meat. But this was different. This was focused, deliberate. They were asking about Seraphine. Draven set the report down, poured himself water from the pitcher on his desk. His hands were steady. They were always steady. That's what years of killing did to you. It burned away the tremors, the hesitation, everything soft. Left only the cold mechanism of survival. He'd known this would happen. The moment he'd spared her in the throne room, the moment he'd made that offer, he'd known it would draw blood. Everything he did drew blood eventually. The question was how much? A knock at the door. Sharp. Efficient. Come. Vex entered, looking even more haggard than usual. The old chancellor hadn't slept either. Your Majesty, the preparations for the announcement are complete. The scribes have drafted the proclamation. The noble houses have been summoned to court at midday. Good, Draven said. He turned from the window, studied the man who'd served him for 20 years. Tell me honestly, Vex, how badly will this go? The chancellor's throat worked. He knew better than to lie. Very badly, sire. The houses will see it as weakness. Taking a rebel sympathizer as your bride, they'll question your judgment. Let them question, Draven said. I've been questioned before. They'll also question her lineage, Vex continued carefully. If word spreads about House Lunareth, about the prophecy, it could destabilize everything. Half will see her as a threat. The other half as a tool to be used against you. Then they'll all learn what happens when they reach for tools that bite back, Draven said flatly. Anything else? Prince Malrek requested an audience this morning. Of course he did. Draven felt something that might have been amusement if he still remembered how to feel amused. Tell my dear brother I'll see him after the announcement, not before. Vex bowed and retreated, leaving Draven alone with his thoughts. And his thoughts, as always, turned to violence. Not the hot rage of battle. That was easy, simple. You saw the enemy, you cut them down, you moved to the next one. This was the cold calculation of empire. Who to eliminate? Who to cow into submission? Who to let live just long enough to serve a purpose? Malrek was family. That complicated things. But not as much as it should have. Draven had killed family before. He gathered himself, straightened his armor, and went to collect his future queen. Seraphine was already awake when the servants arrived. She'd spent the night sitting by the window, watching the city breathe in the darkness. Nightfall Citadel sprawled across the hilltop like a cancer, all black stone and sharp edges, and below it the capital spread in concentric rings of wealth and poverty. The palaces near the top, the slums at the bottom, an empire built on bones. And she'd just agreed to become part of it. The servants were nervous. 3 women in palace livery, hands trembling as they laid out clothes and cosmetics. One of them, barely more than a girl, kept stealing glances at Seraphine like she might explode. I don't bite, Seraphine said. The girl jumped, dropped a bottle of perfume. It shattered on the marble floor, filling the room with the cloying scent of roses. I'm sorry, the girl gasped. I'm so sorry. I'll clean it up. It's fine, Seraphine said. She stood, moved toward the spilled perfume. The girl scrambled back like Seraphine had drawn a knife. The oldest of the servants, a woman with gray streaking her dark hair, stepped forward. We're here to prepare you, milady, for the announcement. His Majesty's orders. Milady. not prisoner. The word tasted wrong in Seraphine's mouth. What exactly does preparation involve? She asked. The woman gestured to the clothes laid out on the bed. A bath. Proper attire. Something befitting the future empress. Seraphine looked at the dress. It was beautiful in an aggressive sort of way. Deep crimson silk with black embroidery. High collar, long sleeves. The kind of thing designed to make a statement. I look like I'm going to war, she said. You are, the older woman said quietly. Just a different kind. Their eyes met. Understanding passed between them. This servant had seen things, had survived in this palace long enough to know how the game was played. What's your name? Seraphine asked. Barren. How long have you served here, Barren? 23 years, the woman said, since before the current emperor took the throne. Then you knew his father. Something shifted in Barren's expression. Hardened. I did. Was he worse? Barren's silence was answer enough. Seraphine let them bathe her, dress her, arrange her hair. She sat still while they painted her face, transforming the exhausted healer into something that looked like it belonged in a palace. She watched herself disappear in the mirror, replaced by this crimson creature with two bright lips and eyes lined in black. When they finished, she barely recognized herself. Perfect, Barren said softly. Now you look dangerous. Good, Seraphine said. She was going to need dangerous. The door opened without warning. No knock, no announcement. Just Draven filling the doorway like he owned it. Which he did. He owned everything. The servants fled, smart. Draven studied her and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Approval, maybe. Or hunger. With him it was hard to tell the difference. You clean up well, he said. You say the sweetest things, she replied. He moved into the room, and she was struck again by how much space he took up. Not just physically, though he was built like a man who'd spent his life swinging a sword. It was something else, an aura of violence barely contained, like standing next to a wolf that remembered it was a wolf. Having second thoughts, he asked. About 50 of them, she said. But I don't go back on my word. Good, because neither do I. He held out his hand. The court is assembled. Time to give them something to talk about. She took his hand. His grip was warm, calloused, absolutely certain. The hand of a man who'd never doubted his right to take what he wanted. They walked through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadow. Tapestries depicting battles and executions. Everywhere the smell of dragon oil and old stone. Guards snapped to attention as they passed. Servants pressed themselves against walls. No one looked directly at Draven. No one dared. Tell me something, Seraphine said. Do you actually enjoy this? The fear. The groveling. He glanced at her. Would you believe me if I said no? Probably not. Then why ask? Because I'm trying to figure out if you're a monster by choice or by necessity. That stopped him. They were alone in the corridor, just for a moment, and he turned to face her fully. Does it matter? He asked. It might, she said. If we're going to do this, if I'm going to share your throne and your bed and bear your children, I need to know if there's anything human left under all that armor. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost too quiet to hear. Ask me again in a year, if we both survive that long. Then he was moving again, pulling her forward, the moment broken, the wall back up. They reached the throne room. She could hear the murmur of voices beyond the bronze doors. Hundreds of people waiting to judge her. Last chance, Draven said. You walk through those doors, there's no going back. She thought of her mentor, thought of all the people she'd treated in dirty barns and burned-out villages, thought of the choice between dying meaninglessly or living dangerously. Open the doors, she said. He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile, but it was real. That's my queen. The bronze doors swung open. The throne room fell silent as they entered. Every eye turned toward them. 300 nobles in their finest, all trying not to stare and failing completely. Seraphine felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing, judging, calculating, wondering who she was and what it meant. Draven didn't pause, didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward the throne like he owned the ground beneath his feet, which he did. He owned all of it. Seraphine kept pace beside him, head up, shoulders back, the way Marin had taught her in those few minutes before Draven arrived. You're not a prisoner anymore. You're their future empress. Make them believe it. They climbed the 7 steps to the throne platform. Draven sat, gestured to the smaller throne beside his that Seraphine hadn't noticed before. It looked new, hastily made but richly appointed. She sat. The throne was cold through the silk of her dress. Lord Chancellor Vex stepped forward, his voice somehow carrying through the vast space. Noble houses of Verathorn, you have been summoned to witness a historic announcement. His Majesty Emperor Draven Calthorn has chosen a bride. The murmuring started immediately, whispers cascading through the assembled nobles like wind through dead leaves. Vex continued, raising his voice over the noise. The Emperor will wed Lady Seraphine of House Lunareth, last daughter of the ancient bloodline. She will be crowned Empress and bear the heirs that will secure our empire for generations to come. The whispers turned to gasps, then shouts. Lunareth, someone called out. That house was destroyed, executed for treason. The bloodline was ended. Another voice. This must be a fraud. Draven stood. The shouting stopped like someone had cut every throat in the room. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. When he spoke, every word fell like a hammer. I am aware of the history. I'm also aware that histories can be incomplete. Seraphine bears the mark of House Lunareth. She carries their blood, and she will be my empress whether you approve or not. Your Majesty. A man near the front stepped forward. Lord something. Seraphine couldn't remember all the names Marin had tried to teach her. This is highly irregular. The noble houses should have been consulted. A marriage of this importance. I don't recall asking for consultation, Draven said. I'm informing you, not requesting permission. But the prophecy, someone else called out. A woman, this time. If she truly is of Lunareth blood, Belsul. The old words say she will either save the empire or destroy it. How can we trust? You can't, Draven said flatly. You can't trust her. You can't trust me. You can't trust anyone in this room because half of you are plotting against me right now and the other half are waiting to see who wins. But here's what you can trust. This woman is under my protection. She will be my wife. And anyone who touches her answers to me personally. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Seraphine watched it land. Watched the nobles process what that meant. Draven's personal attention wasn't something anyone wanted. His personal attention usually ended with someone's head on a spike. A slow clap echoed through the chamber. Everyone turned. Prince Malrek stood in the back, still applauding with that mocking smile on his face. Beautiful speech, brother, he called out. Very moving, but I have a question if I may. Draven's eyes narrowed. Speak. Malrek strolled forward, the crowd parting before him like water. He was handsome in a way Draven wasn't, refined, polished, the kind of face you'd trust right up until he slipped the knife between your ribs. He stopped at the base of the throne platform, looking up at them. If Lady Seraphine truly carries Lunareth blood, if she truly possesses their legendary abilities, perhaps she could demonstrate. For the court, just to ease concerns about fraud. The challenge was obvious. So was the trap. Seraphine felt Draven tense beside her, felt the violence coiling in him like a spring. But before he could speak, she stood. What would you have me demonstrate? She asked. Her voice was steady. Marin would be proud. Malrek's smile widened, the Lunareth gift. Truth-seeing. The ability to pierce through lies and see what a person truly is. Surely if you possess this ability, you could show us. Show you how, exactly. Simple, Malrek said. Look at me. Tell the court what you see. Truth or lie. Hero or villain. Loyal brother or scheming traitor. Let's see if the legends are real. The throne room held its breath. Seraphine looked at Malrek, really looked at him. And the truth was she had no idea if she had any special abilities. The mark on her shoulder was real. The scattered memories of her childhood before the healers found her were real. But magical truth-seeing, that was legend, myth. Or it had been. Because as she stared at Draven's brother, something shifted behind her eyes. The world took on a different quality. Colors deeper. Sounds sharper. And Malrek was fear and ambition wrapped in silk. She could see it, actually see it, The terror of never being first, never being chosen, never being enough. And beneath that, the desperate hunger to take, to claim, to prove, and blood. So much blood on his hands already, so much more he was willing to spill. The vision passed as quickly as it came, left her dizzy, breathless. Malrek was still smiling, waiting. "I see a man afraid of his own inadequacy," she said clearly. "A man who mistakes cruelty for strength, who will betray anyone to prove he matters. I see someone who's already chosen treason and is just waiting for the right moment to strike." The silence was absolute. Malrek's smile never wavered, but his eyes went dead. Around them, the court erupted. Accusations, denials, shock. Draven stood, his voice cut through the chaos. "That's enough. Clear the room, all of you." No one argued. The nobles fled. Within minutes, the throne room was empty except for Draven, Seraphine, Malrek, and 24 guards. The brothers stared at each other across the space. Malrek broke first. His laughter was bitter. "Impressive. Did you plan that together? Very convincing performance." "It wasn't a performance," Seraphine said, but Malrek ignored her. He only had eyes for Draven. "You think marrying some rebel healer will save you," he said. "You think giving her a crown will make the Empire forget that you're a butcher, that we're both butchers. Father made sure of that." "Father's dead," Draven said. "I made sure of that." "And someday someone will make sure of you," Malrek said. "Maybe me. Maybe her. Maybe one of the 1,000 other people you've wronged. But it's coming, brother. We both know it." "Get out," Draven said quietly. Malrek gave a mocking bow. "As you command, Your Majesty." He turned to leave, paused. "Oh, and congratulations on the engagement. I'm sure you'll be very happy together, right up until one of you kills the other." He left. His footsteps echoed on marble until the bronze doors boomed shut behind him. Seraphine realized she was shaking. The vision had taken something out of her, left her hollowed out and raw. Draven turned to her. "Did you mean it? What you said about him?" "Every word," she said. "I don't know how I knew, but I knew." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. That makes things simpler. Simpler how? Now I know exactly who to kill." Checks. The wedding was set for 3 days hence. 3 days for the nobles to adjust to the new reality. 3 days for Seraphine to learn how to be an empress. 3 days for Malrek to make his move. Draven knew it was coming. The only question was when and how. He spent those days locked in strategy sessions with his generals, reviewing troop positions, identifying loyalists and potential traitors, building contingencies for every possible scenario. At night, he worked in his study, reading reports until his eyes burned. He didn't see Seraphine, couldn't afford the distraction, but he thought about her, more than he should, the way she'd stood before the court, the certainty in her voice when she'd called out Malrek, the fact that she might actually possess the gifts that could tear apart everything he'd built, or save it. On the second day, Vex brought news. 3 noble houses had declared for Malrek. Not openly, not yet, but the intelligence was clear. They were moving gold, gathering men, preparing. "Only 3, Draven said. "So far," Vex replied. "Which 3? The Chancellor rattled off names, houses that had supported Draven's father, houses that resented being brought to heel, houses with long memories and longer grudges. Draven made his decision in seconds. Arrest the heads of each house, strip their titles, seize their holdings. Anyone who resists dies. Vex paled. "Your Majesty, that's 15 people. Some of them are women, children." "I don't care," Draven said. He didn't look up from the map he was studying. They made their choice. Now they live with it, or don't. "This will look like tyranny," Vex said carefully. "It is tyranny," Draven said. "That's the point. Let everyone see what happens when they choose my brother over me." The arrests happened at midnight, swift, brutal, efficient. By dawn, 15 nobles were in the dungeons and their estates were occupied by imperial forces. By noon, the city was buzzing with rumors. By evening, Malrek sent a message. Draven read it in his study. The parchment smelled of expensive ink and mockery. The message was simple. 5 words. "You've already lost, brother." Draven burned it, watched the parchment curl and blacken in the brazier. Then he went to find Seraphine. She was in the palace gardens. It surprised him. He'd expected to find her in her room, studying or plotting or whatever it was she did. But instead she was outside, kneeling in the dirt beside a servant who'd clearly been injured. The servant, a young man, had a gash across his arm, deep, recent. Seraphine had torn strips from her dress, was using them to bind the wound. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. "How did this happen?" she asked. "Fell," the servant said. His voice was tight with pain. "Carrying supplies. Lost my footing." Seraphine tied off the bandage. Her fingers were stained with blood. "You need to be more careful. This could have been much worse." "Thank you, milady." The servant scrambled to his feet, bowed awkwardly, and fled, leaving Seraphine alone with Draven. She stood, brushed dirt from what was left of her dress, looked at him with those storm-colored eyes that saw too much. "Come to check on your investment," she asked. "Come to warn you," he said. "Things are moving faster than I anticipated. The wedding's tomorrow. After that, you'll be a target." "I'm already a target," she said. "I was a target the moment you dragged me into that throne room." "Fair point," he admitted. He moved closer, studied the blood on her hands. "You're still healing people." "It's what I do," she said. "I can't just stop because you put a crown on my head. That's going to get you killed," he said. "You can't trust anyone in this palace. Not the servants, not the guards, not even me. Especially not you," she said. But she smiled when she said it. Small, tired, real. Something in his chest twisted. An unfamiliar sensation. Uncomfortable. "I had 15 nobles arrested today," he said. He didn't know why he was telling her. She'd find out anyway. Everyone would. But he wanted her to hear it from him first. Her smile faded. "Why?" "Because they were plotting with Malrek. Because I can't afford uncertainty. Because that's what emperors do." "That's what tyrants do," she corrected. "Same thing," he said. She studied him, then moved to the fountain at the center of the garden, washed the blood from her hands. The water ran pink. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, controlled. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you?" He should have said no, should have walked away. But instead, he found himself saying yes. She turned to face him. Water dripped from her fingers. "I see someone drowning," she said. "Someone who built themselves a suit of armor so heavy they can't remember how to take it off. I see someone who's terrified that if they stop being the monster for even 1 second, everything will fall apart." She paused. "Let that land. And you're not wrong," she continued. "It probably will fall apart. This whole empire is held together by fear and violence, and your willingness to do things other people won't. But that's not the same as it being right." "I never said it was right," Draven said. "I said it was necessary." "For who?" she asked. "For the Empire. For you. Or are those the same thing now?" He wanted to argue, wanted to explain, but the words wouldn't come because she'd hit something true, something he'd spent years burying. The Empire was him. He was the Empire. He'd made sure of that. And if he ever stopped being the one willing to do the terrible things, someone else would step in. Someone like Malrek. Someone worse. Or maybe someone better. That was the thought that kept him awake at night. "Tomorrow," he said instead. "Tomorrow we marry. And then we see if this gamble pays off." "And if it doesn't," she asked. "Then we die," he said simply. "Both of us. But at least we'll die having tried." She laughed. It was a sound of disbelief, of exhaustion, of something that might have been hope if hope wasn't such a dangerous thing. "You're insane," she said. "You've mentioned that before," he said. He held out his hand. "Come with me. There's something you need to see." She hesitated, then took his hand. He led her through the palace, not to the throne room or the great hall or any of the public spaces. He took her down, below, into the parts of Nightfall Citadel that most people never saw. The dungeons were exactly as grim as expected. Stone walls slick with moisture, iron doors, the smell of human waste and despair. Seraphine stopped walking. "Why are we here?" "Because you need to understand what you're signing up for," he said. He gestured to the cells. "These are the nobles I arrested, men and women who decided my brother was a better bet than me." He moved to one of the cells. Inside, a man sat chained to the wall. Lord Garrett of House Ironhold, one of the richest men in the empire. The man looked up. His face was bruised, fresh, recent. Your Majesty, he said. His voice cracked. Please, I can explain. I never meant... Save it, Draven said. He turned to Seraphine. This man financed 3 rebellions, hired assassins to kill me, burned villages that supported my rule, and he did it all while smiling at me across the dinner table. He gestured to the next cell. A woman this time, elderly, frail-looking. Lady Marceline of House Starweaver, he said. She poisoned my food taster last year. Would have gotten me too if I hadn't noticed the smell. Cell after cell, traitor after traitor, each one with blood on their hands. When they reached the end of the row, Draven stopped, looked at Seraphine. Tomorrow I'm going to execute all of them, he said, publicly, as a message. And you're going to stand beside me and watch, because that's what being Empress means. Making the hard choices, getting blood on your hands. Seraphine's face was pale, but her voice was steady. And if I refuse, then you're not ready to be Empress, he said. And this whole thing falls apart before it even starts. She looked at the cells, at the prisoners, at him. There's another option, she said slowly. He raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Exile, she said. Strip them of everything, titles, land, wealth, but let them live. Send them so far away they can never threaten you again. That's mercy, he said. Mercy is weakness. No, she said. Mercy is a tool. Like fear, like violence, you use it when it serves you. And right now executing 15 nobles will make you look desperate, like you're scared of Malrek. But exiling them, showing that you're confident enough to let them live, that sends a different message. He stared at her, turned the idea over in his mind, tested it for weaknesses, found fewer than he expected. You're saying I should show restraint, he said, right before a potential civil war, when I need to look strong. I'm saying strength comes in different forms, she said, and the Empire needs to see that you're more than just a butcher, and if they see it as weakness, if it emboldens Malrek, then we deal with that, she said, together. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the prisoners started to hope. He could see it in their eyes, that desperate, dangerous thing. Hope was what got people killed. But maybe, just maybe, it was also what kept them alive. Fine, he said finally. Exile. But if any of them set foot in the Empire again, they die. No trial, no second chances, just death. Agreed, she said. He gestured to the guards. Release them. Seize all assets. Arrange transport to the eastern wastes. They leave before dawn. The guards moved to obey. The prisoners wept, some with relief, some with rage. Draven didn't care which. He turned and walked away. Seraphine fell into step beside him. They didn't speak until they were back above ground, back in the parts of the palace where the air didn't smell like suffering. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me, he said. This was tactics, not kindness. Can it be both? No, he said. But even as he said it, he wondered if he was lying. They reached her chambers. He should have left, should have gone back to his strategy sessions, his reports, his preparations for war. Instead, he found himself asking a question. What did you really see when you looked at Malrek? She met his eyes. The truth. Which was that he's going to force your hand, she said, soon. And when he does, you're going to have to choose between being the monster who survives or the man who tries to be better. And which do you think I'll choose? She smiled, sad, knowing. I think you'll surprise yourself. She went inside, the door closed. Draven stood there for a moment, then turned and walked away. Tomorrow they'd marry. Tomorrow they'd bind themselves together in front of the Empire. Tomorrow everything would change, or tomorrow everything would burn. Either way, there was no going back now. Malrek received word of the exiles an hour before midnight. He sat in his chambers, reading the report, then reading it again. Then he started laughing. His advisors looked at each other nervously. My lord, one of them ventured, this is good news, isn't it? Your brother showed weakness, mercy. The houses will see, they'll see exactly what I want them to see, Malrek said. He stood, began to pace. My brother didn't show weakness. He showed her influence. The healer. She's changing him. Is that a problem? Another advisor asked. It's an opportunity, Malrek said, because now I know exactly how to break him. He moved to his desk, began writing. 3 letters, 3 different recipients, 3 pieces of a puzzle falling into place. When he finished, he sealed each with his personal sigil. The advisors waited. The wedding is tomorrow, Malrek said. My brother will marry his little rebel queen. They'll stand before the Empire and pledge themselves to each other. Very touching, very public. He smiled, and then we'll see how strong that bond really is, when I take everything he loves and burn it to ashes in front of him. The advisors looked at each other again, uncertain. My lord, the youngest one said, what are you planning? War, Malrek said simply. Real war. Not this political dancing, not these games of influence and betrayal. Actual blood, actual fire. The kind of war that makes men into legends or corpses. He handed the letters to a servant. Send these tonight. I want responses before the ceremony. As you command, the servant said and fled. Malrek turned back to his advisors. Tomorrow changes everything. My brother thinks he's securing his empire, building his legacy, but he's really just putting all his pieces on the board. He paused. Let the moment build, and once they're on the board, I can take them off, one by one, starting with her. The wedding ceremony began at dawn. Draven stood in his private chambers while servants fastened armor over ceremonial robes, black and crimson, the colors of House Kalethorn, the colors of empire built on blood and maintained through fear. He caught his reflection in the polished bronze mirror, recognized the man staring back but didn't know him anymore. Somewhere between last night's decision to exile instead of execute and this morning's preparations, something had shifted. A crack in the foundation he'd spent 20 years building. Weakness. His father's voice whispered in his memory. The old bastard had been dead for a decade, but his lessons lived on like infection in a wound that wouldn't heal. Mercy is weakness. Compassion is weakness. Anything that makes you hesitate is a blade pointed at your own throat. Maybe. Or maybe the old man had been wrong about everything except how to die screaming. The servants finished, stepped back, waited for dismissal. Draven waved them away. Alone, he strapped on the ceremonial sword. Black steel forged in dragonfire. The blade had tasted blood in 17 major battles, had opened throats and split skulls and carved his name into history. Today it was just decoration, a symbol. Everything was symbols now. He descended through Nightfall Citadel toward the Grand Temple. Not a place of worship, exactly. The Empire had abandoned organized faith during his father's purges, but it was where emperors married, where power transferred through ritual and witness, where Seraphine would become his empress or die trying. The corridors were empty, too empty. His guards had cleared the route, but something felt wrong. The kind of wrong that made the hair on his neck stand up, the kind that came right before ambush. He kept walking, hand on sword hilt, eyes scanning shadows. Nothing happened. That made it worse. The temple doors stood open. Beyond them, the assembled witnesses. Every noble house left standing, every general who commanded troops, every merchant prince who moved gold, 300 people who would watch him bind himself to a woman who'd spent her life healing his enemies. The irony was thick enough to choke on. He entered. The crowd rose. He ignored them. Walked straight down the center aisle toward the raised platform where the binding would take place, where Vex waited in ceremonial robes, where 2 thrones sat side by side, where Seraphine already stood. She wore white. Pure white like fresh snow or bleached bone. The dress was simple compared to court fashion. No jewels, no elaborate embroidery, just clean lines and that mark on her shoulder visible through strategically placed lace, the crescent moon of House Lunareth. She'd made it a statement, a challenge. I am what you fear, I am what you destroyed, and I'm standing here anyway. Draven climbed the steps, stood facing her. Up close he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She hadn't slept either. Smart woman. Last chance, he said quietly. Only she could hear. We can still call this off. And do what instead? She asked. Go back to being your prisoner. You were never my prisoner, he said. Not really. She smiled. It was sharp, knowing. Keep telling yourself that. Vex cleared his throat. A not-so-subtle reminder that 300 people were watching. The ceremony began. Draven barely heard the words, ancient ritual, pledges and oaths, binding not just two people but bloodlines, destinies. The future of the Empire and vows spoken over clasped hands. He said what was required. So did she. Their voices steady, controlled, giving nothing away. Then came the blood binding, an old tradition, older than the Empire, older than most things people remembered. Vex produced a knife, silver, ceremonial, sharp enough to cut clean. First Draven's palm, a line of red welling up, then Seraphine's. She didn't flinch. They pressed their hands together, blood mingling. The old magic, whatever was left of it, recognizing the bond. For a moment Draven felt something shift, like reality bending around them, like doors opening in his mind that had been locked forever. Then it passed, left only the sting of the cut and Seraphine's hand warm in his. Vex raised their joined hands, presented them to the assembled crowd. Behold your Empress, Seraphine of House Lunareth, bound by blood to Emperor Draven Kael'thorn. May their union bring strength to the Empire and heirs to secure the throne. The crowd applauded. Dutiful. Mechanical. Fear dressed up as celebration. Draven led Seraphine down from the platform, through the aisle, out into morning light that seemed too bright, too clean for what they'd just done. The wedding feast would be held in the Great Hall, hours of performance, toasts and speeches, and watching enemies smile while they sharpened knives behind their backs. But first they had a moment, just a moment. In the corridor between temple and palace, Seraphine pulled her hand from his, looked at the cut. It was already clotting. That's it then, she said. We're bound. Till death, he agreed, which given current circumstances might not be long. She laughed, raw, exhausted. You really know how to sweet-talk a woman. I'm told it's one of my better qualities, he said. Then more seriously, are you ready for what comes next? The feast, the politics, the 100 ways people will try to kill us before dessert. That, he said. And after, tonight, when we have to actually consummate this. Her expression shifted. Not fear exactly, something more complicated. We're really doing this. All of it. We are, he said, unless you've changed your mind. Have you? He studied her. This woman who'd walked into his throne room in chains and refused to kneel, who'd called him a tyrant to his face, who saw through him like he was made of glass. No, he said, I haven't. Then neither have I, she said. Let's go perform for our adoring subjects. They entered the great hall together, hand in hand, emperor and empress. The crowd rose, cheered, threw flower petals that rained down like blood. Draven saw Malrek at a side table. His brother raised a cup in salute, that same mocking smile. The day's barely started, Draven thought, and you're already gloating. Whatever you're planning, brother, I'll see it coming. Except he didn't. The feast proceeded exactly as expected for 3 hours. Courses of exotic food, wine flowing like water, musicians playing, nobles making speeches about unity and strength and the glorious future of the Empire, all of it hollow, all of it performance. Draven sat beside Seraphine at the high table, picking at food he didn't taste, watching, waiting. The feeling of wrongness hadn't left. If anything, it had intensified. Something was coming. He could feel it the way you feel storms building on the horizon. Beside him, Seraphine was managing the political dance better than expected, smiling at the right moments, responding to toasts with grace, playing the role of empress like she'd been born to it. But he saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes kept scanning the room. She felt it too, the wrongness. Lord Marius of House Ironhold stood to make a toast. Draven barely listened. Another empty speech about prosperity and wisdom. Then Marius said something that cut through the noise. And may the Empress use her legendary gifts to guide us away from the darkness that has plagued this empire for too long. The implication was clear. The Emperor was darkness. The Empress was light. The empire needed saving from its own ruler. The room went silent. Every eye turned to the high table. Draven felt rage building, cold and controlled, the kind that ended with heads on spikes. Before he could respond, Seraphine stood. Lord Marius, she said, her voice carried across the hall. You speak of darkness and light as if they're separate things, as if one can exist without the other. But that's not how the world works. She paused. Let them absorb that. The empire wasn't built on kindness. It was built on hard choices and harder consequences. And while I intend to use whatever influence I have to help those who suffer, I won't pretend that what came before was wrong simply because it was difficult. Draven stared at her. She was defending him. To his enemies, in front of the entire court, Seraphine continued, her words precise, deliberate. Change takes time, it takes patience, and it takes understanding that the man who built this empire did so because the alternative was worse. So let's toast to the future by all means. But let's not forget that we have a future because Emperor Draven made sure we survived the past. She raised her cup. To the Empire, and to the Emperor who holds it together. The crowd had no choice but to drink, to echo the toast, to swallow their criticisms. Marius sat down, face red. Draven caught Seraphine's eye. She gave the tiniest shrug, as if to say, "You're welcome." But the moment passed, the feast continued, and that feeling of wrongness kept building. It broke an hour later. A guard burst into the hall, stumbling, bleeding from a gash across his forehead. "Your Majesty," he gasped. "The eastern gate. We're under attack." The hall erupted, nobles shouting, guards drawing weapons, chaos spreading like fire. Draven was on his feet instantly. What kind of attack? How many? "Thousands," the guard said. "Prince Malrek's forces. They're inside the city. Inside the palace." Draven's blood went cold. Impossible. The city walls, the garrison. They should have given warning, should have held. Unless they didn't need to hold because they'd already opened the gates. He turned, scanned the hall, found Malrek's table. Empty. His brother was gone. Had probably been gone since before the attack started. This wasn't a coup. It was an execution. To Seraphine he said one word, "Run." She didn't argue, didn't ask questions, just moved. But they were already too late. The doors exploded inward. Soldiers poured through. Not Imperial guards, men in different colors. Malrek's personal forces wearing his sigil. And leading them, sword already drawn, was General Kane, one of Draven's oldest commanders, someone he'd trusted with his life 100 times. The betrayal hit harder than any blade could have. "Kane," Draven said. His hand found his sword hilt. "You're making a mistake." "No mistake," the general said. He looked tired, resigned. "I'm making a choice between a tyrant who rules through fear and a prince who promises something better." "Better," Draven repeated. "Malrek. You think he'll be better." "I think he'll be different," Kane said. "And different is what we need." Around them, nobles were fleeing, screaming, dying as Malrek's soldiers cut them down with cold efficiency. This wasn't about prisoners. This was about sending a message. Draven's guards formed up around him, 20 men against 200. The math was simple, brutal. He could fight, could take as many with him as possible, die like a warrior, like an emperor. Or he could survive. To Seraphine he said quietly, "The servants' corridors, behind the tapestry. Go." "Not without you," she said. "Not a request," he said. "An order." She hesitated, then grabbed his arm. "Hard enough to bruise, you better follow me." Then she was gone, slipping through the chaos toward the hidden exit. Draven turned back to Kane, to the soldiers, to the death marching toward him. "Take the Emperor alive," Kane called out. "Prince Malrek wants him to watch before he dies." The soldiers surged forward. Draven's guards met them. Steel on steel, screams, blood spraying across marble floors. Draven fought, killed 3 men in as many seconds, his blade finding throats and hearts with mechanical precision. 20 years of warfare distilled into pure violence, but there were too many, always too many. A sword caught him across the ribs. His armor turned most of it, but the impact drove air from his lungs. He stumbled, recovered, killed the man who'd struck him. Another blade from behind, this one taking him in the shoulder, deep, crippling. He went down on one knee, blood pouring from the wound, vision swimming. Hands grabbed him, disarmed him, forced him to the ground. Kane stood over him, sword pointed at Draven's throat. "It's over," the general said, not without sympathy, not without regret, but over nonetheless. "Where is she?" Draven said through gritted teeth. "Where's Malrek?" Kane gestured. Soldiers moved deeper into the palace, following the path Seraphine had taken. No. The word tore out of Draven like something dying. He tried to rise, tried to fight, but the wound in his shoulder had done its work. His left arm wouldn't respond, wouldn't obey. They dragged him to his feet, forced him to watch as more of Malrek's soldiers secured the hall, as his guards died, as his empire crumbled. Then from deeper in the palace, a scream. Female, terrified, cut short. Seraphine. Draven fought like an animal, thrashing, biting, using his good arm to try to break free. Rage and terror giving him strength that should have been impossible. They beat him down, broke his knee with a mace, left him gasping, broken. Cain looked away, couldn't meet his eyes. Coward, Draven spat. You're all cowards. We're survivors, Cain said quietly. That's all anyone is in the end. Footsteps echoed through the hall, measured, unhurried. Malrek emerged from the servants' corridors. His armor was clean. No blood on him. He hadn't fought, hadn't risked himself, just let others die for him. In his wake, 2 soldiers dragged Seraphine. She fought them, kicked and clawed and cursed, but they were too strong. Her white dress was torn, blood on her face, but alive, still alive. Brother, Malrek said. He stopped in front of Draven, looked down at him like observing something broken. I wish it hadn't come to this. Liar, Draven said. Malrek smiled. Fair enough. I absolutely wanted it to come to this. But I did give you a chance, warned you this was coming. You just refused to see it. He gestured to the carnage around them. The bodies, the blood, the shattered empire. This is what happens when you try to change, he said, when you let weakness in. Father understood that. He never hesitated, never showed mercy, and he died in his bed surrounded by his enemies' corpses. You killed him, Draven said. I did, Malrek agreed easily, because he taught me the most important lesson, the one you forgot. There's no room for 2 alphas. One always has to die. He drew his sword, placed the tip against Draven's throat. But I'm not going to kill you yet, he said. First you're going to watch your empire burn, watch your precious empress suffer, watch everything you tried to build turn to ash. Then, and only then, you'll die. To the soldiers holding Seraphine, he said, take her to the dungeons. Make sure she understands what happens to people who defy the natural order. No, Draven said. The word came out broken. Desperate. Please. Malrek leaned close, whispered so only Draven could hear. You begged. I never thought I'd see the day. The mighty Draven Kael'thorn reduced to please. Father would be so disappointed. He straightened, addressed the assembled soldiers. The Emperor is dead. Long live the Emperor. They cheered. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to make it real. Malrek turned to leave, paused. One more thing, brother. That prophecy. About the Moon Queen either saving the Empire or destroying it. I'm betting on destroying, much more entertaining that way. He left. Took half the soldiers with him. The rest dragged Draven and Seraphine in opposite directions. Her toward the dungeons, him toward something worse. In that moment being pulled away from her, Draven understood what he'd lost. Not the Empire, not the throne, not even his life. He'd lost the possibility of being something more than the monster his father had made him. And the worst part, the part that would haunt him if he lived long enough to be haunted, was that Seraphine had been right. He'd surprised himself, just not in the way either of them had hoped. Gunt. They threw Draven into a cell in the North Tower, not the dungeons. Malrek wanted him to have a view, wanted him to watch the city burn. And it was burning. From the barred window, Draven could see smoke rising from a dozen districts. Malrek's forces putting down resistance, making examples, showing the Empire what happened when you backed the wrong brother. The shoulder wound had stopped bleeding, but the pain was constant, grinding. The broken knee was worse, swollen to twice its normal size. He couldn't walk, could barely move. All he could do was sit against the cold stone wall and think about everything he'd done wrong. The list was long. He'd trusted Cain, trusted others like him, men who'd fought beside him for years, never considered that their loyalty might have limits. He'd shown mercy. Let those nobles live. Thought it would prove something, prove he could be more than his father's son. All it had proven was that Malrek was right. Mercy was weakness. The moment you hesitated, the moment you let the blade waver, someone else would strike. He'd married Seraphine, bound her to him, put a target on her back the size of the empire. And now she was somewhere in this palace, being hurt, being broken, because of him. The cell door opened. Draven looked up. Vex stood there. The old chancellor looked ancient, diminished, like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "Your Majesty," he said quietly. "Don't," Draven said. "Don't call me that. I'm not emperor anymore." "You are until you're dead," Vex said. He entered the cell, carried a basin of water and bandages. "I came to tend your wounds. Malrek sent you." "No," Vex said. "I came on my own, because I've served you for 20 years and I won't abandon you now." He began cleaning the shoulder wound. His hands were steady, professional. But Draven saw the tremor underneath. "How bad is it?" Draven asked. "The city?" "Bad," Vex said. "The garrison surrendered. Most of them anyway. The ones who didn't are dead. Malrek controls the palace, the gates, the treasury." "And Seraphine?" Vex's hands stilled, then resumed working. "She's alive. That's all I know." "For now," Draven said, "but Malrek won't keep her alive long. She's only valuable as leverage against me." "Then you need to give him what he wants," Vex said. "Which is what?" "My abdication. My head. Both." "Your acknowledgement that he's won," Vex said. "That you submit. Once he has that, once the Empire sees you broken, her value as leverage disappears. He might let her live. Or he might kill her anyway just to hurt me," Draven said. "That's what I would do." Vex finished bandaging the shoulder, moved to the knee. "This needs a healer, a real one. I'll see what I can do." "Don't bother," Draven said. He looked out the window at the burning city. "Let it rot. Let it all rot." "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" Draven asked. He turned to face the old man. "I built this empire on corpses, held it together through fear, and the moment I tried to be anything else, the moment I listened to her and showed mercy, it fell apart. Maybe Malrek's right. Maybe I was never meant to be anything but the monster." "Seraphine doesn't believe that," Vex said. "Seraphine doesn't know me," Draven said. "She sees what she wants to see, some broken man who can be redeemed. But there's nothing to redeem. There never was." Vex stood, gathered his supplies, then spoke carefully. "I served your father, watched him rule through terror for 40 years, and do you know what I learned?" Draven waited. "Monsters don't doubt themselves," Vex said. "They don't question. They don't agonize over decisions. Your father never lost a moment's sleep over the people he killed, never wondered if there was another way. That's what made him a monster." He moved toward the door, paused. "You're not him," Vex said. "You never were. And that's why you still have a chance." "A chance to do what?" Draven asked. "I'm broken, imprisoned, defeated. A chance to choose who you want to be when this is over," Vex said. "Because it's not over. Not yet." The door closed, locked from outside. Draven sat in the darkening cell, watching his city burn, thinking about choices, about the man he'd been, the man he'd tried to become, the man he still might be if he survived this, if any of them survived this. Hours passed, the sun set, the fires burned brighter in the darkness, then footsteps in the corridor, multiple sets, boots on stone. The door opened. Malrek stood there, clean armor, fresh clothes, looking every inch the emperor he now claimed to be. "Brother," he said, "I hope you're enjoying the view." Draven said nothing. Malrek entered, gestured. Soldiers dragged someone in behind him. Seraphine. She'd been beaten, face bruised, split lip reopened, cuts on her arms. But her eyes still held that same defiance. They threw her down beside Draven. She collapsed, didn't try to rise. Draven wanted to reach for her, wanted to pull her close, protect her, but his body wouldn't obey. The broken knee, the ruined shoulder. All he could do was watch. Malrek crouched between them, looked from one to the other. "Here's how this works," he said conversationally. "Tomorrow at dawn, I'm going to be crowned emperor. The entire city will watch. And you're both going to be there." "To watch you steal my throne," Draven said. "To legitimize my rule," Malrek corrected. "You're going to publicly abdicate, Transfer all power to me. Acknowledge me as the rightful emperor. And if I refuse, then she dies, Malrek said simply. Right there on the platform, in front of everyone, slowly, painfully. And you get to watch every second. He stood, brushed imaginary dust from his armor. But if you cooperate, if you give me what I want, I'll let her live. Exile. Far from here. Far from you. But alive. You're lying, Draven said. Maybe, Malrek admitted. But it's the only chance she has. So what's it going to be, brother? Your pride or her life? He left them there, locked in together. In the darkness of the cell, with the city burning outside and death coming at dawn, Draven finally looked at Seraphine. She was staring back at him. Don't, she said. Her voice was raw, broken. Don't give him what he wants. If I don't, you die, Draven said. I was dead the moment I walked into your throne room, she said. We both know that. So don't throw away whatever chance you have just to buy me a few more hours. There is no chance, Draven said. It's over. She laughed. It hurt to hear. Then it doesn't matter what you choose. Do what you think is right. And what is right? He asked. How should I know? She said. I'm the one who thought I could change a tyrant by marrying him. Clearly my judgment is questionable. Despite everything, Draven felt his mouth twitch, almost a smile. I really did want to be better, he said quietly. For you. For the Empire. I wanted to prove I could be more than what my father made me. I know, she said. I saw it. That's why I stayed. She shifted. Painful, slow. Managed to get close enough to lean against him. So here's what we do, she said. Tomorrow, when he puts us on that platform, we fight. Both of us. We make him kill us in front of everyone. Let them see what kind of emperor he really is. That's suicide, Draven said. It's defiance, she corrected. It's showing them that some things are worth dying for. He felt her hand find his, her fingers cold, trembling, but strong. You told me once that you built this empire because the alternative was worse, she said. So let's show them the alternative. Let's show them what it looks like when people choose principle over power. We'll both be dead, Draven said. Maybe, she said. Or maybe we'll inspire someone else to finish what we started. She rested her head against his good shoulder. Either way, she said, I'd rather die standing beside you than live knowing I gave him what he wanted. Draven sat there, broken, defeated, everything he'd built crumbling around him. But in that moment, with Seraphine's hand in his and dawn approaching fast, he made a choice. Not the choice his father would have made, not the choice the Empire expected. A different choice, a harder one. The choice to be the man she'd seen when she looked at him with those storm-colored eyes that saw too much truth. All right, he said, we fight. She squeezed his hand. Good. They sat together in the darkness, waiting for dawn, waiting for death, waiting to see if defiance alone could change the world, or if it would just get them killed a little more memorably than most. Dawn came like a blade across the throat of night. Draven woke to pain, the shoulder a constant throb, the knee swollen so badly he could see it even through the dim light filtering into the cell. His body had become a catalog of injuries, each one screaming that survival was a fantasy people told themselves before they died. Beside him, Seraphine stirred. Her breathing was ragged, uneven. They'd spent the night leaning against each other, sharing warmth in a cell that grew colder with each passing hour. Two broken people waiting for an execution dressed up as a coronation. She opened her eyes. Those storm-gray eyes that had seen through him from the first moment, that had looked at a tyrant and decided he was worth saving. How's the knee? She asked. Useless, he said. I can't walk, can barely stand. Then we crawl, she said. We fight on our knees if we have to. He almost laughed. Would have if his ribs didn't hurt so much. You're serious? Completely, she said. She shifted, testing her own injuries. Winced. We agreed. We don't give him what he wants. That was before I realized I'd have to be carried to my own execution, Draven said. Not exactly the defiant end I was imagining. Seraphine looked at him. Really looked. And he saw something in her expression that hit harder than any beating could have. Pity. Not for herself. For him. You're still thinking like an emperor, she said quietly. still worried about how it looks, whether you'll seem weak. I am weak, he said. Look at me. I am looking, she said. And I see someone who's been carrying the weight of an empire for 20 years. Someone who never let himself rest, never let himself be anything but strong. And now, when you're actually broken, you think that makes you worthless. She reached out, touched his face with fingers that trembled from cold and pain and exhaustion. But here's what I know about strength, she said. Real strength isn't never falling down. It's getting back up when every part of you is screaming to stay down. It's choosing to fight when you know you'll lose. It's looking at impossible odds and saying, not today. Her voice was fierce, raw. Every word pulled from somewhere deep. So yes, you're broken. Yes, you might have to crawl. But you're still here, still breathing, still choosing to stand against a tyrant even when that tyrant has already won. And that, Draven Calethorn, is the strongest thing I've ever seen. He stared at her. This woman who should have hated him, who had every reason to let him rot, who instead was sitting in a freezing cell giving him reasons to fight. How did you survive this long? He asked, with that much hope still intact. I didn't survive, she said. I lived. There's a difference. Surviving is just not dying. Living is finding reasons to keep going even when dying would be easier. She leaned back against the wall, closed her eyes. Besides, she said, hope's not the fragile thing people think it is. It's vicious, stubborn. It digs its claws in and refuses to let go even when everything's burning. Like you, he said. Like us, she corrected. Footsteps in the corridor. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on stone. They were coming. Draven tried to stand. Failed. The knee wouldn't bear weight, collapsed under him like wet paper. Seraphine grabbed his arm, helped him brace against the wall. Between the two of them, they managed to get him upright. Barely. He leaned heavily on her, feeling every wound protest. The door opened. Guards flooded in, 6 of them. Armed, armored. Behind them came Vex. The old chancellor looked like he'd aged another decade overnight. His face was drawn, exhausted, but his eyes held something that might have been resolve. It's time, he said quietly. The guards moved forward, grabbed Draven, started to drag him. I can walk, Draven said through gritted teeth. No, you can't, one of the guards said, not unkindly, just stating fact. They hauled him out of the cell. Down the corridor, Seraphine walked beside them, guards flanking her. She moved stiffly, favoring her left side where the bruises were worst. The palace corridors were different in daylight, still imposing, still built to intimidate, but now they felt hollow, like walking through a tomb. They passed servants who pressed themselves against walls, who wouldn't meet Draven's eyes. Some looked guilty, others relieved. A few actually smiled. Those were the ones who'd never forgiven him for what he'd done to their families, their villages, their lives. He'd always known they were there, the ones who smiled in his presence and celebrated his downfall in private. But seeing it now, seeing the naked relief on their faces, hit differently. This was what Empire looked like from the other side. Not glory and strength, just fear wearing a crown. They descended through the palace, down toward the grand plaza where coronations and executions both took place, where emperors were made and unmade in front of crowds who cheered either way because cheering kept you alive. Draven could hear the crowd before he saw them, thousands of voices, the entire city packed into the plaza. Forced or willing, didn't matter. They were there. The guards brought them to a preparation chamber, small room off the main plaza. Vex dismissed the guards, closed the door. For a moment it was just the 3 of them. Emperor, Empress, Chancellor. I'm sorry, Vex said. I tried to find another way. There is no other way, Draven said. This is how it ends. We all knew it would end badly. The old man looked at Seraphine. Your Majesty, he said to her, if you're willing to cooperate, if you denounce the Emperor and pledge loyalty to Prince Malrek, he might spare you. No, she said simply. You'll die, Vex said. Eventually she agreed. But not on my knees. Vex's face crumpled. For a moment Draven thought the old man might actually cry, but he pulled himself together, reached into his robes. Then you'll want these. He produced 2 items. A knife, small, easily concealed, and a vial of clear liquid. Poison, he said. Fast-acting, painless. If things go badly, If you want to choose your own end. Draven took both. The knife disappeared into his boot, the vial into a hidden pocket. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, Vex said. I should have done more. Should have seen this coming. Should have protected you. You served me faithfully for 20 years, Draven said. That's more than most can say. The door opened. Malrek stood there. Fresh armor polished to a mirror shine, crown already sitting on his head. His father's crown, the one Draven had worn for a decade. Seeing it on his brother's head felt like another wound, deeper than the physical ones. Ready? Malrek asked. His tone was cheerful, mocking, the cat playing with mice before the kill. For you, Draven said. Always. Good, Malrek said, because we have quite the show planned. He gestured. Guards grabbed Draven and Seraphine again, hauled them toward the plaza entrance. Malrek walked beside them, close enough to speak privately. I want you to know, he said to Draven, this isn't personal. You were actually a decent emperor, better than father in some ways. Then why? Draven asked. Because decent isn't enough, Malrek said. The Empire doesn't need decent. It needs feared. It needs someone willing to do whatever it takes without hesitation, without doubt, without mercy. He smiled. That cold smile that made him look like their father. You started to hesitate, he said. Started to doubt. The moment you spared those nobles, the moment you married her, that's when I knew you'd lost. Lost what? Seraphine asked. The killer instinct, Malrek said. The thing that separates emperors from corpses. Our father had it. I have it. But Draven here, he let it slip. And in this world, the moment you stop being willing to do the worst thing possible, someone else takes over who is. He paused at the entrance to the plaza. Beyond it, the roar of the crowd was deafening. But I'll give you this, he said. You're going out with style. That takes courage. Pointless, suicidal courage. But courage nonetheless. Then he strode out into the plaza. The crowd erupted, half cheering, half silent, all watching. Draven took a breath, then another. His heart was hammering. Not from fear, from rage, from the knowledge that he was about to die and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it, except choose how. He looked at Seraphine. She looked back. No words needed. They both knew what came next. The guards pushed them forward, out into the light, into the plaza where thousands waited to watch them fall. The execution platform stood in the center of the plaza. Draven had built it 5 years ago, after a particularly nasty rebellion. He'd wanted something impressive, something that would make examples visible from every corner of the city. Now he was going to die on it. The irony was thick enough to choke on. The guards dragged them up the steps. 7 steps. Same as the throne platform. Everything in the Empire came in 7s. His father's superstition. Draven had never bothered to change it. At the top, Malrek waited. Beside him stood the high priest, or what passed for one now that organized faith was mostly gone. The man who would legitimize the transfer of power with old words and older rituals. The crowd pressed close. Draven scanned them, saw nobles who'd sworn loyalty to him weeks ago, saw merchants who'd grown rich under his rule, saw common people who'd never cared who wore the crown as long as the bread stayed cheap. None of them would help. None of them could. This was his to face alone. Well, not quite alone. Seraphine stood beside him, battered, bleeding, unbroken. Malrek raised his hands. The crowd quieted, thousands of people falling silent in seconds. Citizens of Varathorn, he called out, his voice carried across the plaza. You stand witness to history. Today, the old empire dies, and a new one is born. Scattered cheers, mostly from his supporters planted throughout the crowd. My brother, Malrek continued, ruled with strength, with power. He built this empire from warring kingdoms, united us through force of will and force of arms. He paused. Let that settle, but strength alone is not enough. An empire needs vision, needs purpose, needs a ruler who won't hesitate when hard choices must be made. More cheers, growing louder. Draven Emperor Draven has grown soft, has let mercy cloud his judgment, has chosen a rebel bride over the good of the empire. The crowd murmured, uncertain now. This was the dangerous part. Malrek needed to convince them, needed to make them believe the tyrant had gone weak. And so Malrek said, in the interest of the empire's future, I have taken the throne. Not through treachery, not through betrayal, but through necessity. Liar, Seraphine said, loud enough for the first few rows to hear. You murdered his guards, invaded the palace, seized power through violence. Malric turned to her, smiled. The Empress speaks, he said. How touching. Tell me, my lady, do you truly believe you can save him? Do you think your words matter here? My words don't need to save him, she said. They just need to be true. And the truth is, you're a coward, a usurper, a man so terrified of his own inadequacy that he had to steal what he couldn't earn. The crowd was silent now, riveted. This wasn't going according to script. Malric's smile hardened. You should have stayed quiet, died with dignity. But since you want to speak, let's hear what the mighty emperor has to say. He turned to Draven. Well, brother, any last words? Draven straightened. The movement sent agony through his shoulder, his knee, his ribs. He ignored it, focused on the crowd, on the thousands of faces watching. When he spoke, his voice carried, strong, clear, the voice of a man who'd commanded armies. 20 years ago, I took this throne through blood and fire. I made this empire through conquest and terror. I did things that would make you sick if you knew the details. He paused. Let them absorb that. And I told myself it was necessary. Told myself the empire needed a monster to hold it together. That fear was the only language power understood. The crowd was utterly silent now. But I was wrong, he said. Fear doesn't build empires, it just builds prisons. And everyone in them, from the emperor down to the lowest servant, is a prisoner. He looked at Malric, at his brother wearing their father's crown. So here's my last act as emperor, he said. I refuse to give you my blessing. I refuse to abdicate. I refuse to make this easy. Malric's face darkened. You'll die. I was always going to die, Draven said. The only question was whether I'd die as the monster you want me to be, or as the man I tried to become. He turned back to the crowd, to those thousands of watching faces. Choose better than I did, he told them. Choose leaders who don't rule through fear, who don't need executions and terror to hold power. Choose the hard path of building something worth having instead of the easy path of taking what others built. It was a good speech, honest, raw, everything he'd never let himself say in 20 years of ruling. It was also pointless. The crowd would cheer whoever wore the crown. That's what crowds did. But at least he'd said it. At least in his last moments, he'd tried to be something more than the Butcher King. Malric's hand went to his sword. This was it, the moment, death coming on a blade. Draven braced himself, hoped it would be quick. Then chaos erupted. From the back of the crowd, someone screamed, then another, the sound of steel on steel, fighting. Draven's head snapped around. What? Through the crowd, cutting a path like a ship through water, came soldiers. But not Malric's forces. Different colors, different sigils. And leading them, sword already slick with blood, was General Kane, the man who'd betrayed him, who'd taken Malric's coin and delivered the palace. Except Kane was cutting through Malric's guards now, killing them, clearing a path toward the execution platform. What is this? Malric demanded. Kane, what are you doing? The general reached the base of the platform, looked up at them. His face was grim, determined. Making a choice, he said. The same choice I made 20 years ago when I followed you into hell and helped you build this empire. He turned to his soldiers, to the hundreds of men who'd appeared from the crowd, men wearing imperial colors, Draven's colors. Emperor Draven may have shown mercy, Kane called out, may have hesitated when he should have struck, but he never abandoned his people, never forgot what we were fighting for. He pointed his sword at Malric. You would rule through fear alone, would turn this empire into the same nightmare we fought to end. And I won't serve that, not again, not ever. The crowd was in chaos now, some fleeing, some fighting, some standing frozen in shock. Malric's face had gone white with rage. Kill them, he screamed at his guards. Kill them all! But his guards were already dying. Kane's forces were better positioned, better trained, and they had the advantage of surprise. Within minutes, the plaza was a battlefield. Malric grabbed Draven, hauled him close. A knife appeared in his hand, pressed against Draven's throat. Call them off, he snarled, or I open you here. Draven looked at his brother, at the fear and rage warring in his eyes. at the crown sitting crooked on his head. "Do it," Draven said. "Prove you're exactly what I said you were." For a moment he thought Malrek actually would, saw the muscles in his brother's arm tense, felt the blade bite into skin. Then Seraphine moved. She'd palmed Vex's knife, small, easily overlooked. In the chaos no one had seen, she drove it into Malrek's side, between the armor plates. Deep, precise. A healer knew anatomy, knew exactly where to cut to make it hurt. Malrek screamed, dropped his knife, stumbled back. Seraphine yanked the blade free. Blood sprayed. She raised it again. Malrek's guards surged forward, grabbed her, disarmed her. She fought like a wild thing, kicking, biting, cursing. They threw her down. One of them raised his sword. "No!" Draven roared. The word tore out of him with every ounce of strength left. The guard hesitated. Just for a second. That second was enough. Kane's forces hit the platform, crashed into Malrek's guards like a wave. Steel flashed, blood flew, men screamed and died. Someone grabbed Draven. He thought it was an enemy. Tried to fight. "Your Majesty," a familiar voice said. "It's me, Vex." The old Chancellor had a sword. Was fighting. Actually fighting. Draven had never seen the man hold a weapon in 20 years. "The guards," Vex gasped. "The ones who stayed loyal. They're staging a counter-coup." Kane organized it, used Malrek's arrogance against him. "Where's Seraphine?" Draven demanded. The chaos was too thick, too violent. He couldn't see her, couldn't see anything but blood and bodies and the Empire tearing itself apart. Then through the press of fighting men, he saw her. On the ground, not moving, no. He tried to move. The knee gave out. He collapsed. Agony white-hot and blinding. Someone hauled him up. Kane. The general's face was covered in blood. Not all of it his. "We need to move," Kane said. "This platform's going to be overrun." "Not without her," Draven said. "She's dead," Kane said flatly. "I'm sorry, but we need to go now." Draven looked. Really looked. Saw Seraphine's still form. Saw the pool of blood spreading around her. Felt something break inside him that had nothing to do with broken bones. Then her hand moved. Just slightly. Fingers curling, uncurling. "She's alive," Draven said. "Get her. Now!" Kane cursed but obeyed. Fought his way through the press of bodies, grabbed Seraphine, hauled her over his shoulder. The three of them, Draven supported by Vex, Seraphine, unconscious in Kane's arms, fought their way off the platform. Behind them, Malrek screamed orders. His voice raw, desperate. But his forces were breaking, scattering. The counter-coup was working. The Empire was eating itself alive. They reached the edge of the plaza. Loyal soldiers formed a shield wall, protected their retreat. "Where?" Kane gasped. "Where do we go?" "The Citadel," Draven said. "We take back Nightfall Citadel or we die trying." "It's still held by Malrek's forces," Vex said. "Then we kill them," Draven said. "Every single one who won't surrender. We end this. Today." The old man nodded, signaled to the soldiers. The counterattack began. Through streets running red with blood, past buildings burning from the fighting, the Loyalist forces pushed toward the palace, toward the seat of power, toward everything. Draven barely felt the pain anymore. Shock, maybe. Or just rage burning so hot it consumed everything else. Seraphine was dying. His empire was collapsing. His brother had betrayed everything. But he was still breathing, still fighting, still emperor. And he was going to take back what was his or burn the whole damn city to the ground trying. The Citadel loomed ahead, black stone against a smoke-darkened sky. Home, prison, throne. The gates were closed, barred. Defenders lined the walls. Kane looked at the fortifications, looked at their forces, did the math. "We can't take it," he said. "Not directly. We don't have siege equipment. Don't have time." "Then we don't take it directly," Draven said. "The servants' passages, the secret ways, every fortress has them. I know them all." He turned to the soldiers. 20 of you. With me. The rest hold here. Don't let Malrek's forces regroup." "Your Majesty," Vex said, "you can barely walk." "Then I'll crawl," Draven said. "But I'm taking back my throne." He looked at Seraphine, still unconscious, still bleeding. "Take her somewhere safe," he told Kane. "Find a healer." The general hesitated. "Sire, she'd want to fight." She can't fight, Draven said. So I'll fight for both of us. He gathered his 20, the best fighters, the ones who'd followed him longest, who knew what he was capable of when pushed. Through the chaos of the burning city, they moved. Ghosts in the smoke, killers in the dark, to the hidden entrance Draven had built. The escape route every paranoid emperor needed. The passage was unguarded. Malrek hadn't known about it, or had forgotten. His mistake. Draven led them in, down into the guts of Nightfall Citadel, through tunnels that stank of rot and old stone, up secret stairs that servants used, emerging in the heart of the palace. And there, in the throne room, surrounded by guards and sycophants who'd already switched their loyalty, sat Malrek, his brother, his blood, his enemy. The wound in Malrek's side was bandaged, hastily, poorly, blood seeping through. He looked up as Draven emerged from the hidden passage, looked at the 20 soldiers, at Draven himself, broken and bleeding but standing. For a moment neither spoke. Then Malrek laughed, that same bitter sound from the night before. You don't know when to die, he said, just like father. I learned from the best, Draven said. He drew the knife. Vex's knife. The one Seraphine had used. His guards charged Malrek's forces. Steel crashed against steel. The throne room became a slaughterhouse. And Draven limped forward, each step agony, each movement a reminder that his body was failing. But his will, his rage, that remained. Malrek drew his sword, stood, faced his brother. This is how it ends, he said. One of us dies. Today. Finally, Draven said, something we agree on. They moved toward each other. 2 brothers, 2 emperors, 2 men who'd spent their lives preparing for this moment. The throne room burned around them. The empire collapsed. The future died. And still they fought, because that's all men like them knew how to do. The first strike came fast. Malrek's blade whistled through air where Draven's head had been a heartbeat before. The Emperor twisted, his ruined knee screaming protest, barely avoiding the follow-up thrust that would have opened his throat. This was different from the battles Draven had fought in his youth, different from the clean exchanges of trained warriors testing each other's skill. This was desperate, ugly, 2 broken men trying to kill each other with whatever they had left. Malrek was faster, healthier. His wound from Seraphine's knife was painful but not crippling. He pressed the advantage, driving Draven back step by agonizing step across the throne room floor, slick with blood that wasn't theirs. Around them the battle raged, loyal soldiers against traitors, or traitors against loyalists. At this point, the distinctions had blurred into meaningless noise. Steel rang on steel. Men screamed. Bodies fell. Draven blocked a slash aimed at his ribs. The impact jarred his wounded shoulder, nearly made him drop the knife. Too small, too light. A butcher's tool against a warrior's blade. You always were stubborn, Malrek said between strikes. Never knew when to quit. When to accept that some things are inevitable. He drove forward, relentless. Draven gave ground, felt his back hit something solid. The throne. His throne. Carved from black stone and bitter victories. Nowhere left to retreat. Malrek's next strike came for the heart. A killing blow. Final. Certain. Draven didn't try to block. Instead, he moved inside the strike. Closer than was safe. Closer than was sane, let the blade scrape across his ribs instead of punch through them, and drove Vex's knife into his brother's gut. Not deep. Not fatal. But enough to make Malrek stumble back. Enough to buy seconds. Draven used them. Grabbed the armrest of the throne. Hauled himself up. Stood on his one good leg with his back against the seat he'd occupied for a decade. This was where it ended. Where it had always been going to end. On the throne or beside it. King or corpse. The distinction had never mattered much. Malrek clutched his stomach. Blood seeped between his fingers. His face had gone pale, but his eyes still burned with that familiar mixture of rage and ambition that had defined him since childhood. You think you've won, he gasped. Think because you got one cut in that changes anything. I think we've both already lost, Draven said. His voice was steady despite the pain radiating through every part of his body. Lost the moment we started believing power was worth what it cost to hold it. Malrek laughed. Bitter. Raw. That's the difference between us, brother. I know exactly what power costs, and I'm willing to pay it. He raised his sword again. Advanced, each step measured, controlled. A wounded predator who knew he only had minutes before blood loss took him down, but was determined to finish this first. Draven shifted his weight. The knee buckled. He caught himself on the throne's armrest, kept the knife ready. They'd played this game as children. Wooden swords in the training yard while their father watched with dead eyes and colder judgment. Malrek had always been faster, more naturally talented, but Draven had always been willing to take more punishment, to outlast, to win by simply refusing to fall. That hadn't changed. Malrek struck high. Draven ducked. The blade sparked off stone above his head. Malrek reversed, brought the sword around in a slash that would have taken Draven's head off. Would have. Except Draven wasn't there anymore. He'd dropped, let his ruined knee finally give out, fell to the floor in a controlled collapse that brought him inside Malrek's guard, and drove the knife up, under the ribs, angled toward the heart. This time it went deep. Malrek's eyes went wide, shocked, like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. Draven held the knife there, looked up at his brother, at the man who'd shared a childhood of terror under their father's rule. Who'd fought beside him in those early campaigns? Who'd turned into everything they'd both hated? "I'm sorry," Draven said, and meant it. Malrek's sword clattered to the floor. His hands found Draven's shoulders, gripped tight. Not in violence, in something closer to desperation. "You were supposed to be like him," Malrek whispered. Blood flecked his lips. "Father, unstoppable, unkillable, a force of nature." He coughed. "Red spray. But you started caring, started trying to be better, and that made you weak." "No," Draven said quietly. "It made me human. There's a difference." Malrek's grip loosened. His legs gave out. Draven lowered him to the floor as gently as his own broken body would allow, sat beside him. "Brothers again, just for a moment, before the end." "Do you think he's waiting for us?" Malrek asked, his voice fading. "Father, on the other side." "I don't know," Draven said. "I hope not." Malrek smiled. Faint, almost peaceful. "Me too." His eyes closed. His breathing stopped. The tension drained from his body all at once. And Prince Malrek Calthorn, who'd wanted to be emperor so badly he'd burned an empire to ash trying, died on the throne room floor in a spreading pool of his own blood. Draven sat beside the body. Couldn't move. Couldn't think. The battle still raged around him, but it felt distant, unimportant. He'd killed his brother, the last piece of family he had left, the last connection to a childhood that had forged them both into monsters. The weight of it settled on him like iron, heavy, crushing, final. "Your Majesty." Vex appeared through the chaos. The old chancellor's robes were torn, splattered with blood, but he was alive. "It's over," Vex said. "Malrek's forces are surrendering. The citadel is ours." Draven looked up at him, at this man who'd served through everything, who'd watched emperors rise and fall and somehow survived them all. "What's the cost?" he asked. Vex's face said everything. Hundreds dead, maybe thousands. The city's burning. Civil war doesn't have clean casualties. "And Seraphine?" The old man's expression shifted, softened. "She's alive. Critical, but stable. Cain got her to a healer." Something that might have been relief flooded through Draven. Might have been. He was too numb to tell. "Help me up," he said. Vex moved to assist. Between the Chancellor's support and sheer stubbornness, Draven got to his feet, stood swaying, looking at the carnage of his throne room, bodies everywhere, blood pooling, the throne itself untouched, waiting, always waiting for whoever would claim it next. The fighting was dying down. Malrek's soldiers throwing down weapons, kneeling, begging for mercy from men who'd learned mercy from a ruler who'd tried too late to teach it. Draven looked at them, these men who'd betrayed him, who'd chosen his brother, who were now terrified of what came next. He should execute them. That's what his father would have done, what Malrek would have done, what the Empire expected. "Let them go," he said. Vex stared at him. "Your Majesty, they're traitors. The law demands..." "The law demands what I say it demands," Draven said. His voice was tired, worn, but certain. "They followed Malrek because they thought he'd win, because that's what we've taught them. that power is the only thing that matters. He gestured at the bodies, at the destruction. Look where that got us. Look what we've become. The surrendered soldiers were watching now, listening, trying to understand if this was mercy or a trick. You're all exiled, Draven said loud enough for all to hear. Stripped of rank and title. You have 1 day to leave the city. After that, you're outlaws. He paused. Let that sink in. But you leave alive. And that's more than my father would have given you, more than I would have given you a week ago. He turned to Vex. Get them out of here. Then gather what's left of the council. We have an empire to rebuild. The old chancellor bowed, began organizing, efficient even in chaos. Draven stood alone in the throne room, surrounded by the dead, by the cost of everything he'd built and everything he'd broken trying to hold it together. Someone approached. Cain. The general's armor was dented, bloodied, but his eyes were clear. The Empress is asking for you, he said. Can she travel? Draven asked. The healers say no, but she's insisting. Of course she is, Draven said. Something that might have been a smile tugged at his mouth. Where is she? The healing wing. Cain hesitated. Sire, there's something you should know. The wound. She lost a lot of blood. They're not sure if she'll fully recover. Take me to her, Draven said. They made their way through the citadel, past servants emerging from hiding, past guards securing rooms, past the slow resurrection of order from chaos. The healing wing smelled of herbs and copper, blood and desperate hope. Seraphine lay on a bed too white, too clean for someone who'd nearly died on an execution platform. Bandages wrapped her torso. Her face was pale, but her eyes were open, those storm-gray eyes that had seen through him from the beginning. You're alive, she said when he entered. Her voice was weak but steady. Barely, he said. He moved to her bedside, sat heavily in the chair someone had placed there. You shouldn't have stabbed him. Someone had to, she said. You were too busy making speeches. Despite everything, he laughed. It hurt. Ribs probably cracked. But it felt good. Real. How bad is it? He asked. The truth. She looked at him. Really looked. The healers say I might not walk right again. The wound damaged something. Muscles, nerves. They're not sure yet. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be, she said. I made my choice. Same as you. She reached out, found his hand. Her fingers were cold but strong. Did we win? She asked. Depends on your definition, he said. Malrek's dead. The citadel is ours. But the city's in ruins, thousands dead, the empire fractured. He paused, looked at their joined hands. So yes, we won, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything, she said. Because we're still here, still fighting, still trying to make this mean something. She pulled his hand to her lips, kissed his knuckles gently. What happens now? She asked. Now we rebuild, he said. Everything, from the ground up. And this time we do it right. You're still emperor, she said. Not a question, a statement. For now, he said. Until the empire is stable enough for something better. Until we can build a system that doesn't require a tyrant to hold it together. That could take years, she said. Then we have years, he said, however long it takes. They sat in silence, two broken people in a broken empire trying to imagine what healing looked like. Finally, Seraphine spoke again, her voice thoughtful. Do you think he was right? Malrek, that caring made you weak. Draven considered, really considered, turned the question over in his mind like a blade he was examining for flaws. Maybe, he said finally, if weakness means being willing to lose, being willing to sacrifice power for principle, then yes, I'm weak. He met her eyes. But I'd rather be weak and human than strong and monstrous. And if that's what costs me the throne eventually, I can live with that. Good, she said, because I married the man, not the emperor. You married both, he said. Then they'd better learn to coexist, she said. She closed her eyes, exhaustion winning. Or I'll stab them both and find someone less complicated. He sat with her while she slept, holding her hand, watching her breathe, proof that not everything beautiful broke when you tried to hold it. The reconstruction began at dawn the next day. Draven stood on the balcony of Nightfall Citadel, looking out over his capital. The fires had been extinguished, but smoke still rose from dozens of districts. The plaza where he'd nearly been executed was empty, scrubbed clean of blood but still stained with memory. Vex appeared beside him, brought reports, casualty counts, damage assessments, the brutal mathematics of civil war. 3,000 dead, the Chancellor said quietly. Maybe more. The final count is still coming in. 3,000, Draven repeated. 3,000 lives. 3,000 families, all because brothers couldn't share power. It weighs on you, Vex observed. Everything weighs on me, Draven said. That's the price of the crown. You could set it down, Vex said carefully. Abdicate. Let someone else carry it. Who? Draven asked. Who else could hold this fractured empire together right now? Who else has the authority? The fear, the respect. Vex was silent. That's what I thought, Draven said. So I carry it, until I can't anymore. Until we build something strong enough to stand without me. He turned from the view, faced the old man. I need you to do something for me, he said. Something you're going to hate. Vex straightened. Your Majesty, I want you to start training a council. Real power. Not just advisors, people who can make decisions, who can check my authority, who can eventually rule without an emperor. That's, Vex paused. That's revolutionary. The nobles will resist. The military will see it as weakness. Let them, Draven said. We're done ruling by fear alone. We're going to show them there's another way. And if it fails, Vex asked, if the empire tears itself apart, then we'll have failed trying to build something better instead of succeeding at being monsters, Draven said. I can live with that. The Chancellor studied him, then slowly nodded. As you command. He paused at the door. Your Majesty, for what it's worth, I think your father would hate what you're becoming. Good, Draven said. That means I'm finally doing something right. Vex left. Draven returned to the balcony, to the city that both loved and hated him, to the empire he'd bled for and that had bled him dry in return. Footsteps behind him. He knew them without turning. Seraphine, moving slowly, leaning on a cane the healers had made her. You should be resting, he said. I've been resting, she said. I'm bored. She joined him at the railing, looked out at the same view, the same broken city. It's going to take a long time to fix this, she said. Years probably, he agreed. Good thing we have years then, she said. She leaned against him, carefully, mindful of both their injuries. I've been thinking, she said. Dangerous habit, he said. She elbowed him, gently. About what we build next, what the empire needs. And what does it need, he asked. Hope, she said. Real hope. Not the fragile kind that shatters the first time things get hard. The stubborn, vicious kind that refuses to die no matter what. Like you, he said. Like us? She corrected. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I want to build hospitals, real ones, in every major city. Free healing for anyone who needs it. That will cost a fortune, he said. We have a fortune, she said. We have a whole empire's fortune. Might as well use it for something other than armies. The nobles will object, he said. Say it's wasteful, that the empire can't afford charity. Then the nobles can object, she said. You're still emperor. They can't actually stop you. True, he said. All right, hospitals. What else? Schools, she said. Not just for nobles. For everyone. Reading, writing, mathematics. Give people tools to build their own futures instead of just waiting for someone to save them. He paused. That's actually brilliant. An educated population is harder to oppress. Exactly, she said, and harder to recruit into rebellions. People with futures don't burn them down as easily. You've been thinking about this a lot, he said. I've had time, she said. Lying in a healing bed wondering if I'd survive gives you perspective. She turned to face him. This empire was built on conquest, on fear, on the idea that strength is the only thing that matters, and maybe that was necessary once. Maybe you did what had to be done. Her eyes were serious, unwavering. But that time's over. Now we build something that lasts because people want it to, because they see value in it, because they have a stake in its success. And if they don't, he asked, if we can't convince them, then we fail, she said simply. But at least we fail trying to be better instead of succeeding at being worse. He pulled her close, careful of her wounds, of his own. two broken people holding each other up. "I love you," he said. The words felt strange, foreign. He'd never said them to anyone in his life. "I know," she said. "I've known since you chose to fight beside me instead of saving yourself." She kissed him, soft, gentle, nothing like the violence that had defined their lives. When they broke apart, she was smiling, that fierce smile that had challenged him from the first moment. "So," she said, "ready to change the world?" "Again," he said. "We already changed it once. This time, we just have to make sure it's for the better." "No pressure, then," she said. "None at all," he agreed. They stood together on the balcony, emperor and empress, tyrant and healer, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and somehow made it mean something. Below them, the city stirred, waking, healing, beginning the slow, difficult work of recovery. And in the months that followed, the empire began to transform. 6 months after the Civil War ended, the first hospital opened in the lower districts. Draven attended the ceremony, against Vex's advice, against the security concerns. But Seraphine had insisted, and he'd learned that arguing with her was both pointless and counterproductive. The crowd was massive. Thousands of people pressed close, not all of them friendly. He could see the hatred in some faces, the ones who'd lost family in his conquests, his purges, his endless wars. He didn't hide from it, didn't pretend it wasn't there, just stood on the platform beside Seraphine and acknowledged what he'd done. "This hospital," he said when it was time for speeches, "doesn't erase the past, doesn't undo the harm I've caused, doesn't bring back the dead." The crowd was silent, listening. "But it's a start," he continued, "a start at building something that heals instead of destroys, that gives instead of takes, that shows you I'm trying to be better than I was." He paused. "Let that settle. I can't ask for forgiveness, can't expect you to forget, but I can promise you this. Every day I wake up, I'm going to try to be the emperor you deserve instead of the one you fear." The applause was scattered, uncertain, but it was there. Beside him, Seraphine smiled, squeezed his hand. After the ceremony, they toured the hospital. Seraphine insisted on examining every room, every supply, making sure it met her standards. Draven watched her work, watched her interact with healers and patients, saw the way people responded to her. Not with fear, with hope. That's what the Empire had been missing, what he'd never been able to give them alone. Hope. In the evening, they returned to the Citadel, to their private chambers, away from the performance of being emperor and empress. "How was it?" he asked. "The hospital." "Perfect," she said. "Well, not perfect. There are improvements to make. But it's a start." "You say that a lot," he observed. "It's a start." "Because it is," she said. "Everything we're doing, it's all just starts. Seeds we're planting, hoping something grows." She moved to the window, looked out at the city coming alive with evening lights. "Do you ever wonder if it'll work?" she asked. "If we can actually change things?" "Every day," he admitted. "Every single day." "Me too," she said. "But then I remember. We already changed the impossible. We turned a tyrant into something almost human. Everything else is just details." He moved to stand beside her, wrapped an arm around her waist. "I'm still a tyrant," he said, "just a conflicted one." "That's the human part," she said. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their city, their empire, their impossible dream. "What are you thinking about?" she asked eventually. "The future," he said. "What we leave behind when we're gone." "Dark thoughts," she said. "Practical ones," he corrected. "I'm not immortal. Neither are you. Eventually, someone else takes over. I want to make sure they inherit something worth keeping. So build it," she said. "We have time." "Do we?" he asked. "How much time before the next rebellion, the next coup, the next brother or general or ambitious noble who decides they can do better?" "However much we have," she said, "and we use every second of it." She turned to face him. "Serious now. You know what the difference is between us and everyone who came before?" she asked. "What?" "We're not trying to build something perfect. We're just trying to build something better. And better is achievable. Better is real." She touched his face, gentle, loving. "So stop worrying about forever. Just focus on tomorrow. And the day after, and the day after that. Build it one day at a time. He kissed her, soft, then harder, pouring everything into it, gratitude, love, fear, hope. When they broke apart, she was smiling. Bed, she said. We both need rest. In a minute, he said. One more thing first. He moved to his desk, pulled out a document he'd been working on, handed it to her. She read, her eyes widening. This is, she paused, this is a constitution. Limits on imperial power, rights for citizens, a council with actual authority. It's a draft, he said. Needs work. But it's a framework for after I'm gone. You're really going to do this, she said. Give up absolute power. Gradually, he said. Over years, decades maybe. But yes, the empire needs to outlive me, and it can't do that if it's built entirely on one person. She set the document down carefully, crossed to him, wrapped her arms around him. You're an idiot, she said into his chest. A stubborn, impossible, beautiful idiot. I've been called worse, he said. I know, she said. I called you most of them. They stood holding each other, two people who'd found salvation in the last place anyone would look, in each other's broken pieces. 2 years after the Civil War, Seraphine announced she was pregnant. The Empire celebrated, cautiously, carefully, but genuinely. An heir meant stability, continuity, future. Draven was terrified. He'd fought wars, conquered kingdoms, executed enemies without hesitation. But the idea of being a father turned his blood to ice. What if I'm like him? He told Seraphine late one night. What if I turn our child into another me? Another monster? Then I'll stop you, she said simply. That's what partners do. They catch you when you fall into old patterns. She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. This child is going to grow up in a different world than you did, she said. A world with hospitals and schools, with hope and opportunity, with parents who love each other instead of hate each other. That won't be enough, he said. Not if he paused. Not if I'm broken. We're all broken, she said. Every single person. The question isn't whether you're broken. It's what you build with the pieces. 9 months later, Seraphine gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, both healthy, both screaming their fury at the world. Draven held them for the first time with hands that had killed thousands, hands that shook with the weight of new life, new responsibility. They're perfect, Seraphine said from the bed, exhausted but radiant. They're terrifying, he said. Same thing, she said. He looked at his children, at these tiny humans who would inherit everything, the empire, the throne, the impossible task of being better than their parents. What do we name them? He asked. She smiled. I was thinking. For the girl. Hope. Hope Calethorn, he said, testing it. I like it. And the boy. Peace, she said. Hope and peace. The things we're trying to build. Draven looked at his son, this child who would grow up in the empire he'd forged and the one he was trying to create. Who would see both his father's victories and his father's crimes? Peace, Calethorn, he said. May you have the chance to earn that name. The twins grew. The empire healed, slowly, imperfectly, but measurably. Rebellion still flared. Draven still had to put them down. But he did it with mercy when possible, with trials instead of executions, with exile instead of extermination. Not everyone approved. The old guard muttered about weakness, about the empire going soft. But the common people noticed, started to see the emperor as something more than a distant figure of terror, started to hope. And hope, as Seraphine had said, was vicious, stubborn, impossible to kill once it took root. 5 years after the Civil War, Draven stood in the throne room, not sitting on the throne, standing beside it. Before him, the first elected council prepared to take their seats. This is madness, Vex had said when Draven announced the plan. Sharing power, giving voice to commoners. It'll destabilize everything. Good, Draven had replied. Let it be destabilized. Let it be uncertain. That's how you know it's real change and not just cosmetic. Now, watching these men and women take their positions, commoners and nobles alike chosen by vote instead of birth, Draven felt something unfamiliar. Pride. Not in conquest, in creation. The council will advise on all matters of state, he said to the assembled witnesses. Their voice will carry weight equal to the emperor's in most decisions. They represent you, all of you, noble and common, rich and poor. He paused. Let them absorb that. This doesn't mean the empire is weak. It means we're strong enough to share power. Strong enough to admit one person, no matter how powerful, can't see everything, know everything, be everything. The crowd murmured, uncertain. This was unprecedented, revolutionary, dangerous. Draven looked at Seraphine. She stood at the side of the hall, holding hope and peace. Their children watched with wide eyes, too young to understand but old enough to remember. This was his legacy, not the battles won, not the enemies defeated. This, the attempt to build something that could outlast him. The council session began. Debates, discussions, real ones, where people disagreed without being executed for it. Draven participated, listened, sometimes overruled, sometimes was overruled. And the empire didn't collapse, didn't fracture, just kept turning, evolving, growing into something new. 10 years after the Civil War, Draven stood on the balcony of Nightfall Citadel. He was older now, gray threading his dark hair, scars that ached in cold weather. The limp from his broken knee had never fully healed, but he was alive, and the Empire was alive, and that had to count for something. Seraphine joined him, moving slower than she used to. The wound from the execution platform had left permanent damage, but she was still fierce, still brilliant, still the light that kept him from drowning in darkness. The children want to know when you'll teach them to fight, she said. They're 10, he said. You were fighting at 8, she pointed out. That's exactly why I want them to wait, he said. Let them be children a little longer. You're going soft in your old age, she teased. Good, he said. The Empire could use some softness. He looked out at the city, at the hospitals dotting the skyline, the schools, the public forums where people gathered to debate and argue and participate in their own governance. It wasn't perfect, wasn't even close. There was still poverty, still crime, still injustice, but it was better, measurably, objectively, better. Do you think it'll last, he asked, after we're gone? I don't know, she said honestly. Maybe, maybe not, but we gave it the best chance we could. She took his hand, laced their fingers together. That's all anyone can do, try, build, hope that the next generation does better. They're going to ask about my past, he said. Hope and peace. When they're older, they'll want to know what kind of man their father was. Then tell them the truth, she said. Tell them you were a monster who tried to become a man, that you failed as often as you succeeded, that you made terrible choices for what seemed like good reasons. And if they hate me for it, he asked. Then they hate you, she said. But at least they'll know you were honest, that you didn't hide from what you'd done. She rested her head on his shoulder. Besides, she said, they'll also know you built hospitals, opened schools, created a council, gave them a world with more choices than you ever had. That should count for something. It should, he agreed. He wasn't sure it would, but it should. They stood together as the sun set over Varathorn, over the empire of blood and bone and desperate hope. 10 years wasn't enough to erase the past. Wasn't enough to make up for the thousands who'd died, the suffering he'd caused. But it was something. A start. Seeds planted in scorched earth. Some would grow, some would die, but some would grow. And that had to be enough, because it was all any of them got. One life, one chance, one opportunity to decide who they wanted to be when the story ended. Draven Calthorn had been a conqueror, a tyrant, a monster who'd built an empire on corpses and ruled through fear. But in the end, in the last chapters of his story, he'd also been something else, a man who'd tried, who'd failed, who'd gotten back up and tried again, a man who'd learned that real strength wasn't in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to build, to change, to admit you were wrong and do better. A man who'd found love in the last place he'd expected, in the eyes of a woman who'd refused to kneel, who'd seen through all his armor to the broken thing underneath and decided it was worth saving. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could ask for, to be seen, to be known, and to be loved anyway. Inside the citadel, hope and peace were laughing about something. The sound carried through open windows. Bright, clean, untainted by the darkness their parents had waded through. "That's the future," Seraphine said. "Right there. That laughter." "Then we'd better make sure it has a world worth laughing in," Draven said. "We will," she said. "We are. One day at a time. One day at a time." Draven looked at the horizon, at the empire stretching beyond sight, at everything he'd broken and everything he'd built. And for the first time in 20 years, he felt something close to peace, not redemption. He didn't deserve that, probably never would. But Pete, the knowledge that he'd tried, that he'd changed, that when the history books were written, there would be more than just blood and conquest. There would also be hospitals, schools, a council, a constitutional framework for power, and 2 children who might, just might, grow up to be better than he'd ever been. That was the legacy. Not the battles won, not the enemies defeated, but the seeds planted, the hope kindled, the small, stubborn refusal to let the darkness win completely. Tomorrow he'd wake up and keep building, keep trying, keep failing and succeeding in equal measure. But tonight, standing on the balcony with Seraphine's hand in his and his children's laughter in the air, Draven Calthorn allowed himself to stop, to breathe, to simply exist in this moment, this impossible, beautiful, broken moment, and to know that whatever else he'd been, whatever else he'd done, he'd ended here. Not alone, not hated, not just the monster, but something more, something human, something worth the struggle it took to become. The sun set, the stars emerged, the empire slept, and in Nightfall Citadel, a tyrant and a healer held each other close. 2 broken people who'd built something whole from their shattered pieces, and that was enough. It had to be. It was all anyone ever got.